Which field floods first when Miller Creek comes over? My brother held his fork halfway to his mouth. A piece of ribeye trembled on the tines. The North 80, he said. Dad stared at his plate. Wade tried again. The hay flat. Mom made a little sound through her nose, the one she used when a conversation had become inconvenient, but she still intended to win it. The Marlow Bottom, I said. It floods first. It always has. Wade lowered his fork. Okay, congratulations. 10 minutes earlier, my father had announced that Wade had earned the farm. Not that he would manage it, not that he would work it with me. Wade would receive the Bell Place, all 312 acres, the house, the barns, the machine shed with the buckled west door, and every field he apparently could not name. I would be allowed to remain in the little white house by the county road. Mom had smiled when Dad explained that part, like they were giving me a lake cabin instead of permission to keep living in a house whose furnace I'd paid to replace. That's enough, Mara, Dad said. I looked at him. Enough what? Your brother doesn't need to pass some damn quiz. It was one question. It was a trick question, Wade said. You've lived here 18 months, and you've lived here your whole life. Sorry I didn't memorize every pet name Dad has for a patch of dirt. Dad's knife scraped across his plate. The sound was small, but all four of us stopped moving. He hated noise at the table unless he was making it. It was their 40th anniversary. Mom had put candles out even though it was still light outside, and she'd used the china with the tiny blue flowers she complained couldn't go in the dishwasher. A bakery cake sat on the counter under a plastic lid. Happy 40th. Glen Patty was written across the top. They had spelled Patty wrong. Mom noticed me looking at it. It still tastes the same. That was pretty much the family motto. Dad leaned back carefully. His lower back had been giving him trouble again, though he'd spent the past month telling people he was better than before. Before had included a spinal procedure, a walker he refused to use, and 3 weeks of me sleeping on their couch because he kept trying to get to the bathroom without turning on a light. We didn't make this decision lightly, he said. I almost laughed, but I knew the sound would come out wrong. Wade set down his fork. He was wearing one of his new work shirts, blue plaid with pearl snaps. The cuffs were still stiff. He'd rolled them twice, exactly even, and there wasn't a speck of grease beneath his nails. Dad's hands had looked dirty even at church. Mine did too. Mom reached across the table for me. Your father and I prayed about this. I moved my hand to my water glass before she could cover it. How long? She blinked. How long what? How long have you been praying about giving Wade the farm? Dad answered. That's private. So, a while. Mara, Mom said, don't turn a blessing into a competition. I looked at Wade. He'd gone back to cutting his steak, but the red had climbed above his collar. Shame always made him look angry. When we were younger, that had fooled me. I'd thought he was fearless. It took me until my 30s to understand that half of Wade's courage depended on someone else cleaning up behind it. What exactly did he earn it by doing? I asked. Wade dropped his knife. You know what? I'm sitting right here. Good. You can answer. I came back. Dad nodded as if Wade had named a difficult crop disease. You came back, I repeated, when Dad needed me. I looked at Dad. He studied the butter dish. 18 months earlier, Wade had arrived in a truck full of clothes, a television, and unopened boxes of promotional tumblers from his failed outdoor event company. Mom had cried in the driveway. Dad had put a hand on the back of Wade's neck and said, You're home now. I had been in the barn replacing a float valve. Wade had come looking for me after dark and leaned on the gate while I finished. He told me the business had gone under because his partner was a coward, his landlord was a crook, and people had stopped understanding the value of a handshake. Then he admitted his marriage was over. I'd hugged him with manure on my boots and told him he could stay as long as he needed. Apparently that had counted as him coming back when Dad needed him. I was here too, I said. We know that, Mom replied quickly. Dad sighed. Nobody said you haven't helped. Helped. I had arranged the feed delivery sitting beside Dad's hospital bed while he argued with a nurse about non-skid socks. I had changed his dressings. I had filled the pill organizer Mom kept mixing up because she refused to wear her reading glasses. I had checked cattle at 4 in the morning, worked my shift at Barlow Ag Supply, come back at 5:30, and eaten crackers for supper over the calving monitor. Wade had repainted the machine shed. It did look nice. Dad pointed his knife at me, not threateningly, just the way he pointed with whatever was in his hand. Wade has settled down. He wants to continue the Bell name on this land. My name is Bell. You know what I mean? I did. That was the problem. Wade rubbed his jaw. Mara, nobody's throwing you out. Mom brightened, relieved to have reached the generous part. The little house will always be yours. Will it? The question landed harder than I meant it to. Mom's mouth pinched. Dad looked insulted. Wade looked at Mom, then Dad, because he didn't know the answer either. Dad said, "As long as you want it." "That isn't what she asked," Wade said quietly. For 1 second, I saw my brother instead of the man sitting in the chair chosen for him. Then Mom's eyes filled. "This is our anniversary," she whispered. There it was. I had ruined it. I pushed my chair back. Dad said, "Sit down. I'm not hungry. You ate half a steak. Then I'm half not hungry." Wade snorted before he could stop himself. Mom glared at him. Dad's face darkened. The laugh almost caught me too, which made everything worse. Wade and I had always laughed at the wrong times. Funerals, church, the afternoon Dad drove through the closed garage door because he thought the truck was in reverse. Wade could break me with one look, and for years I'd mistaken that for proof that we could never truly hurt each other. I carried my plate to the sink. Mom said, "We haven't had cake. You can have my flour." "Mara, I mean it. Give me the big one in the corner." My purse was hanging on the back doorknob. I took it down, and the old brass knob knocked against the wood. Dad's voice followed me. "We can discuss details after you've calmed down." I turned around. "Did you tell him before tonight?" Nobody answered fast enough. Wade's face did something complicated. He looked sorry, but not sorry enough to have warned me. "How long have you known?" I asked him. "A couple weeks." Mom dabbed beneath one eye with her napkin. "We asked him not to say anything." "And you're good at doing what you're asked now?" "That's not fair." I nodded. "No, it isn't." Outside, the evening was soft and damp. The yard smelled like cut grass and lighter fluid from Dad's grill. Mom had planted red geraniums along the porch, but she'd left them in their plastic pots and set the pots inside the flower bed. She did that every year, then complained in July that they were root-bound. Wade came out while I was crossing the gravel. "Mara." I kept walking. "Come on, stop." He caught up near my truck. "I didn't know he was going to announce it tonight. You knew he was going to do it eventually." "Yes." "And you didn't tell me." "They asked me not to." I turned. "There you are again, doing what Dad needs." He shoved his hands into his pockets. The truck behind him was spotless, except for dust around the wheel wells. He'd financed it a week after coming home and told Mom the monthly payment was basically nothing. Mom repeated that phrase to me as though Wade had found a loophole in arithmetic. "I didn't ask them to cut you out," he said. "Did you tell them not to?" "I told Dad we'd run it together." "Together." "Yeah. Who owns it?" His eyes moved toward the barn. "Wade. You heard him. And what am I?" He frowned as if the question had too many possible answers. "You're my sister. Do sisters get wages?" "Jesus, Mara, we haven't worked out all the details. Do they get to make decisions?" "You already make decisions." "Because somebody has to." His jaw tightened. That. That's why talking to you is impossible. You act like everybody else is stupid. I asked you which field floods. You wanted to embarrass me. I wanted one person at that table to hear how ridiculous this is. He glanced toward the house. Through the screen door, Mom's pale shape moved around the kitchen. Dad remained at the table, his shoulders square. probably chewing the steak he'd overcooked because he believed pink meat was a liberal conspiracy. Wade lowered his voice. I can learn the field names. I looked past him toward the dark line of cottonwoods along Miller Creek. That wasn't the question, I said. I drove the quarter-mile to my house with my windows down. The little place had once belonged to Dad's hired man, back when Dad could afford 1 year round. White siding, green roof, 2 bedrooms, and a porch that tilted enough to roll a marble off without touching it. I had moved in at 27 because Mom said an adult woman needed privacy. Dad still came in without knocking. I sat in my truck until the yard light blinked on. My phone buzzed twice. First, Mom. Please come back for cake. Then Dad. North pasture trough running slow. Check-in morning. Neither message mentioned the farm. I went inside, took off my boots, and stood at the kitchen sink drinking water. From that window, I could see the top of the machine shed Wade had painted. The white metal caught the last of the light. He had done a good job. I hated him a little for that. At 6:20 the next morning, someone knocked. That alone told me it was Wade. Dad would have walked in. I opened the door in socks and an old Barlow Ag sweatshirt. Wade held a cardboard drink tray and a paper sack spotted with grease. Peace offering, he said. What did you do to my coffee? Nothing. You put vanilla in it. 1 pump. That's something. He handed me the cup. I got biscuits. I should have shut the door. Instead, I stepped aside because he knew I'd never turn down a sausage biscuit while it was hot. He walked into the kitchen and looked around as if he hadn't been there 3 nights earlier to borrow my socket set. How's Dad? I asked. Mad. Good. Mom cried while she put the china away. I peeled the wrapper off my biscuit. She could have asked for help. She did. I helped. That surprised me enough that I looked up. He shrugged. I know how to carry plates. Put it on your resume. He smiled. For a few seconds we were almost ourselves. Then he pulled a folded sheet of paper from his back pocket and smoothed it on my table. It was an aerial printout of the farm with red lines drawn around the fields. Dad's handwriting filled the margins. Corn, beans, hay, question marks. Wade tapped the page. I want to get ahead on the planting plan, he said. Dad thinks we should switch the western ground, but I remember you saying it was short on potassium last fall. I sipped the sweet coffee and looked at the map. He had come for the same thing they always came for. The answer, the reminder. The quiet correction made early enough that no one else ever had to know there had been a mistake. Wade slid a pen toward me. I figured we could go through it together. I looked at my brother, at the hopeful crease between his eyebrows, at the expensive shirt he'd worn to ask for unpaid help managing the land he had earned. Then I folded the map along its existing crease and pushed it back across the table. No, I said. Wade stared at me. No what? No, I'm not going through the planting plan. His mouth opened, then shut. He laughed once without humor. You're serious. I usually am before 7. Mara, I'm not asking you to plow it for me. I'm asking what you think. You already know what I think. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down again. So this is punishment. No, punishment would be giving you bad advice. You're just going to let me screw up. You could ask Dad. Dad told me to ask you. That almost made me smile. Wade saw it. What? Nothing. No, say it. I wrapped the rest of my biscuit and put it back in the sack. Dad gave you the farm and sent you over here for a planting plan before breakfast. He hasn't given me anything yet. They're making arrangements. Does that make a difference? It should. Why? Because you're acting like I came over here with the deed in my pocket and ordered you to shine my boots. You put vanilla in my coffee. We're not far off. He stood so fast the chair legs barked against the floor. His ears had gone red. Wade could lie with a steady voice, grin through a bad deal, and talk a mechanic into staying open after hours, but embarrassment climbed straight to his ears like a signal flare. I came here because I respect what you know. You came here because you need what I know. What's the difference? That's a bigger question than the Marlow bottom. He snatched the map from the table, then had to stop and fold it properly, because Dad had drawn notes all the way to the edges. I said, "I'll finish what I already committed to. The North Trough, the fence line with Russell Givens, and the 3 bred cows I told Dad I'd watch. I'll close out the feed schedule through the end of the month. After that, you and Dad handle it." "Handle what?" "The farm. Are you quitting?" "I can't quit a job nobody admits I have." His face changed. Not softened exactly, but something behind the anger shifted. "You could have talked to me before doing this. You knew for 2 weeks. That's not the same." "No, it isn't." He put the paper under his arm and picked up his coffee. Mine remained on the table, pale and sweet and completely wrong. At the door, he stopped. "If I'd told them I wouldn't take it unless they gave you half, what would you have done?" I had an answer. I didn't trust it. Wade waited, then nodded as if my silence had proven something for him. That's what I thought. He left the biscuits. The north pasture trough sat crooked beneath an elm that had been struck by lightning years earlier. Dad kept saying he would cut the dead half down. Every storm took another branch and laid it in the grass like a warning. The trough wasn't running slow. It wasn't running at all. I shut off the line, pulled the valve assembly, and found a clump of rust and mineral scale lodged in the inlet. It took me 10 minutes to clear it and another 5 to find the rubber washer after I dropped it in the mud. Dad's utility vehicle came rattling over the hill while I was on my knees. He stopped beside the fence but didn't get out. "Find it?" I held up the valve. Scale and rust. I figured. Of course he had. He watched me put it back together. Dad's watching had always felt like a second tool in the wrong hand. When I was 16, he could stand behind me while I changed a tire and make me forget which direction a lug nut turned. Water coughed through the pipe, brown at first, then clear. "You didn't have to come check on me," I said. "I was checking the cows. The cows are on the other side of the farm." He rested both hands on the steering wheel. "Your mother didn't sleep. Neither did I. She's taking this hard. I didn't realize the farm was hers to lose." His eyes narrowed. "Watch your mouth." I rinsed mud from my fingers in the stream spilling over the trough edge. "I'm 39, Dad. That doesn't mean you can say whatever you please. It seems to work for you." He turned off the engine. The sudden quiet made the pasture feel much larger. Dad climbed out slowly, one hand braced on the seat. I started toward him, then stopped myself. He noticed. His mouth tightened, but he managed the step without me. "This isn't about loving one of you more," he said. "I didn't say it was. You're behaving like it is." I put the tools back in my bucket. "Then what is it about?" "Continuity." "Wade lived in Kansas City until 18 months ago. He's home now. You keep saying that like he crossed an ocean in a rowboat." Dad looked toward the cattle. A red cow lifted her head, decided we had nothing edible, and went back to grazing. "You had opportunities," he said. "Nobody asked you to put your life on hold." I stared at him. It was such a clean sentence, not technically false. That was Dad's favorite kind. "You called me the night before your procedure and asked if I could take 3 weeks off. And you said yes. You didn't ask Wade. Wade was going through a divorce." "I know. Mom told me every day. You've always been more capable." There it was, offered like an explanation instead of an indictment. I picked up the bucket. "I have to work. We're not done. The trough is." He stepped into my path, not close enough to threaten me, just close enough to remind me he was still my father and this was still his pasture. "What do you want?" he asked. The question might have moved me if he'd asked it before deciding what I deserved. Right now? "To get around you. I mean with the farm. You already settled that. We can find a role that suits you. A role. You're good with details. Wade's good with people and planning." Wade planned an outdoor music festival for 900 people in a field with one portable toilet. He learned from that. The sheriff did too. Dad's mouth twitched. He hated that story, but even he couldn't deny its structure. "This bitterness doesn't look good on you," he said. "I'm covered in trough water. Nothing looks good on me." I stepped around him. He called after me, "Don't make this family choose sides." I turned back. "You already did." At Barlow Ag Supply, the air smelled like rubber boots, fertilizer, and burnt coffee. Brenda Barlow stood behind the counter with a pencil stuck through her gray bun, arguing with a man from Tarkio about whether raccoons could open a screw-top feed bin. "They have hands," the man insisted. "They do not have hands, Lloyd. They got little fingers. Buy the latch or don't." He bought the latch. Brenda watched me hang my sweatshirt in the back room. "You look rested. You look sincere. That bad? I've been prettier." I remember. Brenda's husband had founded the store, but Brenda had kept it profitable through 2 recessions and his brief conviction that decorative windmills were the next big thing. She knew every farm account in 3 counties and exactly how long each customer could be trusted after saying, "The check's coming." She handed me a clipboard. "Bell order needs final confirmation." I looked at Dad's name at the top. Seed varieties, treatment options, delivery windows. I had built most of it in January. Wade's handling it. Brenda didn't move. "Wade Bell? We only have the one." "The one who sold waterproof phone cases that weren't waterproof? He said they were water resistant. They resisted water the way my first husband resisted blondes." I put the clipboard back on the counter. Her expression sharpened. Brenda enjoyed gossip, but she recognized pain fast and handled it more carefully than people gave her credit for. "What happened?" she asked. "You'll hear by lunch." "From whom?" "My mother, if she can find a version where I made her cry on purpose." Brenda took the pencil from her hair. The bun stayed in place through muscle memory. "You want me to hold the order?" "No, I want you to talk to Wade. I can do that. Don't make it difficult for him. I'm always difficult. Be your regular amount." She studied me for another second. "All right." At 10:30, Wade walked in wearing a ball cap with Bell Farms embroidered across the front. Dad had ordered 6 of those caps 5 years earlier. Mine was hanging on a nail in my mudroom. Wade saw me behind the register and slowed. Brenda came out of the office. "Morning." "Morning, Brenda." He lifted the folded aerial map like evidence. "Dad said we need to confirm seed." "Sure do." He glanced at me. I turned to the computer and began entering an invoice for fence staples. Brenda spread the order across the counter. "You keeping the 62 to 53 on the west ground?" Wade looked at Dad's notes. "That's the plan. Refuge in bag or separate?" A pause. "In the bag," he said. "And you still want the treated beans for the river ground?" He found something on the page. "Yes." "What rate?" His jaw moved. I typed fence stopples, caught it, and backspaced. Brenda waited with the patience of a woman who could outlast concrete. Wade said, "What did we do last year? We?" He looked at me again. I kept my eyes on the monitor. "Mara," he said. A customer near the boot display pretended to read a mineral block label. I finished the invoice, tore it from the printer, and set it beside the register. Wade gave a tight laugh. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "I'm working. So is everybody else." Brenda laid one finger on the seed order. "I can pull last year's rate." Wade's shoulders loosened. "Thank you, but you're going to tell me why you're choosing it this year." His shoulders tightened again. For the next 40 minutes, Brenda walked him through the order. She didn't humiliate him. She didn't rescue him either. When he didn't know something, she made him say he didn't know. When he tried to answer around a question, she brought him back to it. He learned quickly. That irritated me more than it should have. When they finished, Wade signed the confirmation and put Brenda's pen down carefully. At the door, he looked back at me. "You could have done that in 10 minutes, he said. "I know." He waited for an apology. Brenda picked up the order. The customer by the boots became deeply interested in a second label. Wade nodded once. "Okay." He left. Brenda watched his truck pull away. "He's not stupid," she said. "I never said he was." "No." That would make this easier. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Mom had sent a picture of the anniversary cake. One corner was missing, including the big blue flower. Beneath it, she had written, "I saved your peace." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed, then another one appeared. Sunday dinner. Please don't punish all of us. Brenda turned away before I could see whether she'd read it over my shoulder. I put my phone face down beside the register, but it buzzed a third time. This one was from Dad. Wade changing Westfield to Corn. Call him before he makes a mistake. I read it twice. Then I slid the phone into a drawer and closed it. Brenda waited until the drawer stopped rattling. You know those aren't soundproof? I wasn't trying to lock him in there. Shame. I'd pay to see it. The phone buzzed again against the wood, then went quiet. I made it until noon before Dad came through the front door carrying a split hydraulic hose. He set it on the counter and nodded at Brenda. Need another one of these? Good afternoon to you too, Glenn. It's leaking. Most broken hoses don't improve with pleasantries. Dad glanced toward me. You get my message? Brenda picked up the hose. I'll make this in back. You don't have to leave, I told her. I'm not leaving. I'm moving 20 feet away and listening through a wall. Dad frowned after her, then turned to me. Well? I got it. Did you call him? No. He's putting corn on that west ground. He told Brenda he was considering it. That ground needs another year of beans. Then tell him. I did. What did he say? He said he was waiting on soil samples. That sounds responsible. Dad's mouth flattened. You know that ground. So do you. He listens to you. I looked through the open doorway to the back room. Brenda had switched on the crimping machine. The motor gave Dad privacy he hadn't earned. You told him he was going to make the decisions, I said. That doesn't mean you let him drive into a ditch to prove a point. Is there a ditch in the west field? You know what I mean. That phrase was doing a lot of work lately. Dad leaned closer to the counter. He's your brother. He was my brother yesterday, too, and he will be after your mother and I are gone. I hated when he did that. Dad could turn his own death into a crowbar whenever a regular argument wasn't opening the door fast enough. You aren't gone, I said. You're standing in Barlow's trying to get me to manage Wade from behind a cash register. His eyes flicked toward the back room. Keep your voice down. Why? Because family business doesn't belong all over town. Then maybe don't bring it into town. The crimping machine stopped. Brenda gave us 5 more seconds before returning with the new hose. $38.90, she said. Dad slid his card into the reader. Other way, Brenda told him. I know. He turned it around. While the machine processed, he said to me, Come for supper Sunday. I'll think about it. Your mother asked you. I know, don't drag this out. The card reader beeped. Brenda tore off the receipt and placed it on the counter between us with the solemnity of a peace treaty. Dad tucked it into his shirt pocket. Russell's expecting somebody at 4 for that south fence. I'll be there. You'll need the stretcher. It's already in my truck. His face shifted. For half a second, he looked proud. Then he remembered he was mad and left. Brenda watched through the window until his utility truck pulled onto the highway. He's scared, she said. He should get a dog. He'd make it feel guilty for barking. At 4, I turned off the county road onto Russell Givens's property. Russell was 64, broad through the middle, and incapable of owning an object without painting his initials on it. RG appeared on his gates, buckets, fence pliers, mineral feeders, and one ancient thermos nobody would have stolen under threat. He stood beside the damaged fence with his hands on his hips. 3 hedge posts leaned toward the bell's side as if the argument had been happening for years. Wind got it, he said. The limb lying on the wire tipped me off. That tree was healthy. The middle is hollow. It had leaves. So does poison ivy. I pulled the stretcher from my truck. Another engine approached behind me. Wade's blue pickup rolled over the rise and stopped beside the fence. He got out wearing old jeans instead of the clean work clothes. The knees were stained, and one sleeve of his gray shirt had a tear near the elbow. Russell looked between us. Didn't know I ordered the Deluxe Bell package. Dad send you? I asked. Wade opened his truck bed. He said you'd need help. I don't. Then I'll watch. Russell scratched his chin. Heard you're taking over. Wade went still. News moved fast in our county, especially news Patty Bell wanted people to believe she was keeping private. "Nothing's changed yet," Wade said. Russell looked at me. "That so? Ask Glenn. I just asked you, and I just saved you a phone call." Russell grunted. He knew when a gate was closed. We worked without much talking. The fallen limb had stretched 2 strands and snapped a third. Wade dragged brush while Russell and I reset the posts. When I began splicing wire, Wade held out his hand. "I can do that." I gave him the pliers. He could. Not as fast as me, but cleanly. Dad had taught both of us fencing when we were younger. Wade remembered how to brace the splice against the plier nose and twist without making a barb that would catch hide. His hands weren't soft by the time we finished. One knuckle had opened and blood streaked the wire before he wiped it on his jeans. Russell inspected the repair. "That'll hold." From Russell, it was practically applause. He wandered toward his barn to get us beers, leaving his pliers behind because RG was burned into both handles. Wade flexed his cut hand. Dad came by. He came to Barlow's. "He told me you thought corn on the west field was stupid." "I didn't say that." "He said you did. He texted me to call you before you made a mistake." Wade looked toward the Bell property. The fence ran over the hill and disappeared. "He told me you'd calm down if I gave you a couple days. He told me not to drag this out." Good talk. Very efficient. Russell returned carrying 3 cans. He handed one to each of us, then looked at the blood on Wade's hand. "You need a Band-Aid?" "I'm fine. Didn't ask if you were dying. I've got some in the truck." Russell nodded toward Wade's pickup. "Then I guess we've identified the solution." Wade got the hint. As soon as he walked away, Russell took a drink and said, "Your father's a fool. He's still my father. Both things can be true. Don't spread this." He raised his can. "I don't spread anything. Your wife called my mother before we got here. That's her ministry." Wade came back with his hand wrapped in enough white gauze for a gunshot wound. Russell stared at it. Good Lord, the Band-Aids were old. We finished our beers. Russell went to check a gate and Wade helped me load the stretcher. "I didn't change the west field," he said. "I marked it pending." "Okay. I found the soil reports in Dad's desk. The potassium's low, but not low enough to decide the whole rotation." "Okay. Could you say something besides okay? What do you want me to say?" "That I didn't screw it up." "You didn't screw it up." He tossed the chain into my truck bed harder than necessary. "You sound disappointed." "I'm not." "You looked pretty satisfied at Barlow's. You walked into my workplace and tried to make me answer you in front of customers. I was trying to do my job. So was I." He shut the tailgate. "You want me to fail?" "No, Wade. I want you to stop needing me to prevent it." He leaned against the truck, breathing through his nose. "I can't learn 15 years in one spring." "No." "So what am I supposed to do? Ask questions. Read. Listen when people answer." "I asked you. And I'm the one person you don't get to use for this." His face closed. Russell called from the gate. "If you two are dividing the country, leave my side out of it." Wade pushed off the truck. "Sunday? What about it? Are you coming?" "I haven't decided. Mom's making pot roast. She always makes pot roast when she wants forgiveness without a conversation. She made cake." "I saw." He looked confused. "Mom sent me a picture of my piece." "That's creepy." "That's Mom." His laugh escaped before he could stop it. Mine followed. It lasted 3 seconds, maybe 4. Then he got into his truck, and I remembered why we were standing on opposite sides of something neither of us could name without fighting. Mom was waiting on my porch when I got home. She had the cake slice in one container and chicken casserole in another. Patty Bell believed no emotional crisis was complete until it had been put under foil. "You didn't answer," she said. "I was fixing fence." "With Wade?" "Russell's ministry works fast." She followed me inside. "Wade told me." "That's less surprising." Mom placed the food on the counter and opened my silverware drawer for a fork. "I can get my own." "I know you can." She said it sharply enough that I stopped. Mom peeled back the plastic lid. The frosting flour had flattened against it, leaving a blue smear. I don't understand why you have to make everything they've done for Wade about what they haven't done for you. I sat at the table. That's an impressive sentence. He needed us. So did I. When? The word came out before she could soften it. We both heard it. Mom looked down at the cake and scraped frosting from the lid with the fork. You've always been independent. Independent isn't the same as not needing anybody. We knew you'd be fine. You keep handing him things because you think he'll fall apart, then you call that earning them. That is not why. Then why? She put the fork down. Your father is terrified the farm will be broken up after he dies, so he gives all of it to Wade. Wade wants to stay. I stayed. He needs something to anchor him. There it was. Not tradition, not the Bell name. Need. And I don't? You have your work. You have this house. This house is Dad's. It's yours in every way that matters, except the way where it's mine. She pressed her lips together. I looked at her hands. Her wedding ring was loose now. She'd wrapped a thin piece of clear tape around the underside to keep it from slipping, but she still wore it every day. Did you think I might want the farm? I asked. Of course. Did you ask? We knew you'd want to share it equally. Your father doesn't think that works. So instead of risking conflict between us, you picked the winner. Mom's eyes shone. Why do you have to put it like that? Because you put it in a cake box. She stood, gathered her purse, then stopped at the door. Your brother said you refused to help him. He told you why. He said you were hurt. That was a kinder answer than Wade owed me. I'm finishing what I promised, I said. After that, he runs it. Mom stared at me as if I'd threatened to set fire to the barn. You wouldn't do that to your father. Watch me. She left the casserole. At 11:40, Dad called. I almost didn't answer. Then I remembered the 3 bred cows. What? 17 separated herself by the east lot. She may be starting. I'll come look. I pulled on my boots and drove over beneath a sky thick with low clouds. The barn lights were already on. Wade stood inside the pen, spreading fresh straw. He looked up when I entered. Dad called you too? He called me first. Then why'd he call me? Wade gave a tired smile. Insurance, he said. He likes to carry 2 policies and tell both of them they're the only one. That's not funny, I said. It's a little funny. 17 stood in the far corner with her tail raised, turning her head every few seconds to inspect her own side. Her ears were alert. No hard straining yet. How long has she been separated, I asked. 40 minutes, maybe 50. You've been watching her that long? I read the calving notes on Dad's desk. I glanced at him. What? He said. You told me to read. I didn't think you'd start immediately. I was afraid you'd quiz me again. I stepped into the pen. 17 shifted away but didn't circle. I watched her breathe and checked the loose ligaments around her tail head. She's close, I said. How close? That depends on her. Helpful. Welcome to cattle. We settled against the rails to wait. Wade had brought a thermos of coffee from the house. He offered it to me and I smelled it before taking a sip. Black? I learned. It was terrible coffee, cooked down until it tasted like the inside of a battery, but I drank it anyway. Wind moved against the metal siding. The barn popped and complained around us. 17 pawed once, lay down, stood again, and turned in a tight circle. Wade said, Dad told me you used to sleep out here during calving. Sometimes. He made it sound like you enjoyed it. I like the barn. I don't like sleeping in jeans with a flashlight under my ribs. He said you didn't mind. Dad thinks not complaining is the same as not minding. Wade rolled the thermos cup between his palms. Why didn't you tell me how much you were doing? I did. When? Every time you called. You told me cows got out or Dad was being stubborn. You didn't say you were holding the whole place together? What was I supposed to say? Hello, Wade. How's Kansas City? By the way, I'm essential. You could have asked me to come home. I looked at him. Did you need an invitation? His face tightened. 17 lay down again and began to push, ending the conversation for us. One hoof appeared, then disappeared. Wade leaned forward. Is that normal? So far. The second hoof came after the next contraction. Both were pointed downward. Front feet, I said. Good. Where's the nose? Give her a minute. He watched with the alarm of a man who had discovered that farm life involved more than driving past a field with one hand on the wheel. The nose appeared. 17 strained, stopped, and laid her head in the straw. Wade stood. Should we pull? Not yet. She looks tired. She's having a calf. It isn't supposed to look relaxing. Another contraction came, but the calf made little progress. I waded through 2 more, then went for the chains. Wade followed. Now? Now we help. He held the gate while I stepped behind 17. I looped the chains above the calf's ankles and showed Wade how to place a second loop below the joint. I know how, he said. Then do it. He did, carefully. We pulled with her contractions downward toward her hocks. Wade listened the first time I told him not to pull straight back. The shoulders cleared. The rest of the calf slid out suddenly, dropping into the straw with a wet heaviness that made Wade stumble. Is it breathing? I cleared the nose. The calf shook its head and drew a rough breath. Wade let out his own breath so hard it was almost a laugh. 17 turned and began licking. Dad appeared at the barn door wearing a coat over plaid pajama pants. How'd it go? Fine, I said. Wade held up the chains, his sleeves streaked to the elbow. Had to pull. Dad came closer, inspecting the calf. Big one, he said. Good thing you were here. He was looking at Wade. The words were probably meant for both of us. That was what Dad would say if challenged. Wade looked at me. Mara made the call. I figured she would. Dad rubbed 17's neck when she allowed it. But you stayed with her. That's how you learn. I gathered the towels. Dad said, leave those. We'll clean up. We? He glanced at Wade. He's here. It should have pleased me. Instead, it felt like being dismissed from a shift I had never been hired for. I washed my hands at the utility sink. Wade came over while Dad fussed with fresh straw. I didn't ask him to say that, I know. I told him you did it. I heard you. He turned on the second faucet and started scrubbing his arms. You don't have to make every bad thing they do my fault. I dried my hands on my jeans. No, I said, just the ones you accept. I left him with the water running. Sunday afternoon, I found Mom's blue casserole dish on my counter and realized I had eaten half of it while claiming I wasn't coming to dinner. Returning the dish gave me an excuse. That was what I told myself as I crossed the yard at 5:30. Mom opened the door before I knocked. You came. I brought this. She took the dish as if I'd returned a lost family Bible. Pot roast is almost ready. The kitchen table was set for 4. My usual chair was still in the same place facing the window. Wade sat beside Dad with a laptop open between them. Dad closed it when I entered. That private too? I asked. It's farm business, he said. Then I guess it is. Wade shut the lid. We were looking at field records. Did you find the Marlowe bottom? Marlowe has 2 L's. 1. He opened the laptop, typed something, and closed it again. Mom carried the roast to the table. Can we please have one meal without anybody performing surgery on every sentence? Dad looked at the platter. This knife sharp? It was when I gave it to you. He pressed it into the meat and winced. His back caught when he leaned forward. My hand moved toward the carving fork automatically. Wade reached it first. I've got it, he said. Dad resisted for half a second, then surrendered the knife. Wade cut uneven slices, too thick at one end and ragged at the other. Mom watched him with the tender expression she used for any domestic task he performed without causing a fire. She gave me an end piece because she knew I liked them. For several minutes, we discussed Russell's fence, the forecast, and whether the raccoon at Barlow's had hands. Wade agreed with Lloyd. They're basically little hands, he said. They're paws, I told him. They manipulate objects. So does Dad with a fork. Nobody calls those hands. Dad looked down at the fork he was pointing with and set it beside his plate. Mom laughed despite herself. The sound surprised all of us. Then she reached for the potatoes and said, Wade tells us you two worked well together with 17. We pulled a calf, I said. It was a nice thing. It was a necessary thing. Can it be both? Wade passed me the gravy. I've been thinking, that's a dangerous way to introduce gravy. I'm serious. He waited until I took the boat. When everything's settled, I could put you on salary. Dad shifted in his chair. This was new to him, too. Wade continued. A real salary, not just helping. You'd handle operations, and I'd take care of planning, vendors, the business side. I set down the gravy. Mom looked between us. That sounds fair. Does it? I asked. You've always said you wanted your work recognized, she said. Who makes the final decisions? Wade rubbed his thumb along the edge of his napkin. Somebody has to. Who? I'd own it, Mara, Dad said. Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be. I'm not. Wade's offering me a job on a farm I helped run for free. With pay, Mom said. That's the part you heard? Wade leaned toward me. Most people work for someone else. Then you do it. What? Let them give me the farm. I'll put you on salary. You can handle planning and vendors. His chair creaked as he sat back. That isn't the same. Why? Because I came back to take this on, and I never left. You have a job. So did you once. Mara, Mom said. Wade's face flushed, but his voice stayed level. I'm trying to find a way we can both be here. No, you're finding a way to own everything without losing the person who knows how it works. Dad put down his napkin. Enough. No, Wade said. The room went still. He looked at Dad. Let her answer. I did answer. You told me no before I'd even thought this through. You offered me a better version of the same thing. What would you consider fair? Dad said, This is not a negotiation. Wade kept his eyes on me. I could have said half. I could have named authority, ownership, a vote that mattered. But I was looking at 3 people who had discussed my future before inviting me to dessert, and I couldn't make myself bargain for what they had already shown they didn't believe was mine. I'm not applying, I said. Mom closed her eyes. Dad pushed his plate away. You'd rather work behind a counter for Brenda Barlow than work with your own family? Brenda pays me. She listens when I speak, and she has never once told me I ruined her anniversary. That was not what I said, Mom murmured. It was what you meant. I stood and carried my plate to the sink. Dad said, Sit down, Mara. I finished. You're walking away from this family over land. I turned with the plate in my hands. You gave Wade the land because you said it represents the family. Now you're telling me it's just dirt. It is not just dirt. I know. That was the only reason any of it hurt. I rinsed the gravy into the sink. Behind me, silverware shifted, but nobody spoke. On my way out, Mom followed me to the porch carrying a foil-covered plate. I don't want leftovers. It's not leftovers. I set it aside before supper. For who? You. She held it out. I took it because refusing food had become too much like refusing her, and I wasn't ready to do that cleanly. As I crossed the yard, Wade came after me. You didn't answer the question, he said. I turned. What would be fair? You know? Half? I looked toward the barns, the dark fields beyond them, the little house whose porch light I'd left burning. Would you give it up? I asked. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I nodded. That's your answer, too. At home, I put Mom's plate in the refrigerator beside the remaining casserole. My kitchen was filling with food nobody could say sorry through. On the counter, my phone lit with an email from Wade. He had sent me the updated field map. I opened it before I could stop myself. The red outlines were cleaner now. Each field had an acreage, a rotation note, and a name. Near the creek, in the low ground-shaded blue, he had typed Marlow Bottom, 1L. I closed the file without replying. I almost corrected the acreage on the hay flat. Wade had entered 27.8. The usable ground was closer to 26 after the washout along the eastern edge. But correcting it would have been an answer, and answers were how I kept getting pulled back in. I shut off the kitchen light and went to bed. The next morning, Wade was leaning against my truck when I came outside. You got the map? Yes. You see the field names? Yes. The Marlow Bottom has 1L, I noticed. He waited. I unlocked the truck. "That's it?" he asked. "What do you want, a sticker? I thought you might admit I listened." "You listened." He moved away from the door. "You're exhausting. You were standing outside my house before 7. I was checking 17's calf. The barn's that way." He glanced toward the barn as if I might have forgotten where we kept it. "I also wanted to tell you I'm leaving the Westfield pending until the samples come back." "Okay, there's that word again. It's a useful word, not the way you say it." I climbed into the truck. Wade put one hand on the open door. "Mara." "What?" "I'm trying." "I know." That unsettled him more than sarcasm would have. He let go, and I drove to work. For the rest of the month, the farm kept attempting to reach me through whatever opening it could find. Dad texted about a rattling bearing on the grain auger. Mom called to ask whether the feed delivery usually came before or after lunch. Wade sent pictures of weeds with question marks under them, even though Barlow sold a laminated weed guide for $12. I answered the questions connected to promises I had already made. The rest I redirected. Ask Wade. Ask Dad. Call the vet. Check the manual. Once, after I told Dad to call the equipment dealer about the auger bearing, he replied with a thumbs up. Dad had never used a thumbs up in his life. I suspected Mom had sent it for him, but the image of him searching for the right little yellow hand pleased me enough to carry me through lunch. On the last day of the month, I took a 3-ring binder to the farmhouse. It held the current feed schedule, supplier numbers, pasture notes, medication records, and a list of equipment maintenance due before planting. Nothing in it was new. It was simply the information that had previously lived in my kitchen, my truck, and the part of my brain my family treated like a communal junk drawer. Wade sat at the kitchen table with his laptop. Dad stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. Mom was peeling potatoes at the sink. I placed the binder beside the computer. "What's that?" Dad asked. "The handoff." He opened it. "We already have records. You have receipts in a cigar box. They're organized by year. They're organized by whether the box was empty." Wade pulled the binder closer and read the tabs. Mom turned from the sink. "Do we need to do this right before supper? It'll take 5 minutes. I made pork chops. I'm not staying." Her peeler stopped. Dad flipped through the feed pages. "What's watch consumption south lot? The mineral intake dropped last week. Why? I don't know. Could be the feeder location. Could be the weather. That's why it says watch." He looked up. "So you're handing over a problem you didn't solve. It isn't a problem yet. Then why put it in here?" Wade answered before I could. "So we know if it becomes one." Dad looked at him, then back at the binder. "Fine." I walked Wade through the current commitments. 2 deliveries were scheduled. The vet was coming Tuesday to check the 3 cows. The fence with Russell was complete. 17 and her calf were doing well. The east lot hydrant stuck if it was closed too hard. "Where's the shutoff for that line?" Wade asked. "Inside the old milk room behind the plywood panel." He wrote it down. "That's everything," I said. Dad crossed his arms. "Everything. Everything I was responsible for. You're still responsible for this family." Mom said his name softly. "Glenn." "No, Patty. She's making a production out of walking away, and we're all supposed to admire how organized she is." I put both hands on the back of an empty chair. "I'm not walking away from the family. What do you call it, not working here? You've worked here since you could reach a clutch. And you just gave the farm to somebody else. Nothing has been transferred yet. Then give it to me." The room went quiet. Dad's face hardened. "You know that isn't happening. Then this is." Wade closed the binder. "I've got it," he said. Dad turned on him. "You don't know what you've got." "No, I don't. That's why she made the binder. You think a binder can teach you this place?" "No." "Then stop acting like she's reasonable." Wade's hand stayed on the cover. She said she'd finish the month. She finished it. Mom put the peeler down and wiped her hands on a towel. "Why does everyone sound like strangers?" she asked. Nobody answered. I left before the pork chops. Wade's first changes were small enough that Dad could brag about them without feeling replaced. He labeled the shelves in the chemical room. He built a shared calendar for deliveries. He moved the tool cabinet away from the leaking north wall, something I had suggested 3 years earlier, and Dad had rejected because the cabinet had always been there. The next time I stepped into the shed, every wrench had an outlined spot on a white pegboard. I stared at it longer than I should have. Wade came through the side door carrying a grease gun. "You hate it," he said. "I hate that it makes sense. I took a picture so we'll know what's missing. You're going to find out we own 11 9/16 wrenches and no 10mm sockets. I already found that out. Did you check your pockets?" He patted them, just in case. Some of what he did was good. That made it harder to dismiss the rest. He also changed the fuel supplier because a man he knew from Kansas City offered a lower rate, ignoring that our regular supplier delivered during storms and let Dad carry a balance through bad seasons. He moved the spare fencing wire to the west shed because it looked cleaner there, adding 20 minutes to any repair on the east pasture. He scheduled equipment service so tightly that one late pickup tangled the rest of the week. None of those choices destroyed anything. They just created little frictions I could feel from across the property. Then Leonard Pike came into Barlow's on a Thursday morning and dropped a pair of work gloves on the counter. Len had worked planting and harvest for Dad on and off for 12 years. He was 61, lean as fence wire, and believed every machine built after 1995 had been designed by people who hated farmers. "Your brother sent me home," he said. "I kept pricing bags of clover seed." "Did he?" "Said he didn't need me." Brenda emerged from the office, saw Len's face, and reversed direction so smoothly she deserved applause. "What happened?" I asked. "I told him the gauge wheel on the 12 row was running crooked." "Was it?" "Course it was." "And?" "He said he'd already checked it. I told him checking something doesn't help if you don't know what you're looking at." "That sounds like you." "He got his feelings hurt." Len leaned on the counter. "You need to talk to him." "No." He blinked. "No? It's Wade's decision. You know that planter. So do you. He won't listen. You just said he sent you home. Sounds like he listened and didn't like the delivery." Len straightened. "Glenn never had a problem with how I talk. Dad stopped hearing criticism around 1987. I'm trying to keep your brother from tearing up equipment. And I'm trying to price clover." His face went red beneath his cap. "Fine. Len." "What? Did Wade fire you, or did he tell you to go home for the day?" Len grabbed his gloves. He said if I couldn't take direction from him, I shouldn't come back. "That's not the same thing." "Close enough." He left the bell over the door swinging. Wade called 20 minutes later. "I didn't fire Len, I know. He told you?" He gave a dramatic reading. He climbed onto the planter while I was lowering it. "That sounds like Len. He could have lost a foot." "That also sounds like Len. I told him to get down. He called me city boy in front of 2 other men. He's called me princess since 2013. That doesn't make it okay." "No." Wade went quiet. He had expected me to defend Len, which meant he had already prepared the argument he wanted to have. I said, "You were right to send him home." "You think so? If he ignored a safety instruction, yes." The silence changed. "Thank you," he said. "Don't make it weird." Too late. The next week brought 3 dry days in a row. Tractors started moving all over the county. Every farmer who came into Barlow's claimed he was waiting one more day, then bought enough supplies to work through the night. On my way home Friday, I saw Wade's truck parked at the edge of the Marlow bottom. The field looked ready from the road. The top had grayed, and the tire tracks near the entrance held their shape. But cottonwood leaves and dead grass were packed against the crossing above it, where Miller Creek narrowed through a culvert. I stopped behind him. Wade was pressing soil between his fingers when I walked over. "Going to plant it?" I asked. "Tomorrow, if it tests dry enough." "It won't." He dropped the soil. "You didn't touch it." "I don't need to." "Here we go." I pointed toward the creek. The crossing's clogged. I saw it. Clear it before the rain Monday. The forecast moved the rain to Wednesday. Clear it anyway. He looked across the dark, flat ground. I need to get something planted, Mara, then start somewhere else. This is the first field ready. It looks ready. He laughed under his breath. I thought you weren't giving advice. I'm giving you one warning. About mud? About the field whose name you learned after you inherited it. His face closed. I walked back to my truck. Behind me, he called, "Nothing's been transferred yet." I opened the door. "Tell that to the water," I said. He did not clear the crossing before dark. I could see the debris from my kitchen window if I stood to the left of the sink and looked through the cottonwoods. I told myself I was only checking the weather. Saturday morning, the sound of a tractor woke me before 6. Wade had the 12-row planter unfolded at the edge of the Marlow bottom. He made one slow pass along the high side, stopped, climbed down, and dug into the row. Dad followed behind in the utility vehicle like a parade marshal. I made coffee and closed the curtain. At 8:30, Wade came into Barlow's for graphite, 2 closing wheel bearings, and another pair of gloves. Brenda rang up the bearings. "Where are you running?" "Marlow Bottom." He said the name without looking at me. Brenda glanced toward the windows. "That ready?" "Moisture's right on the upper end. Upper end isn't what she asked. I'm starting high and working down. I was stocking veterinary syringes 3 aisles away. Neither of them needed to raise their voice for me to hear." Brenda asked. "Crossing clear?" Wade looked at me then. I pulled the brush off the intake. "That isn't the same as clearing it," I said. "I can see through it. Water needs to go through it." He picked up the graphite. "Forecast says less than ½ an inch. The forecast also said Wednesday." "I'm aware." Brenda slid the receipt across the counter. Weather enjoys making liars out of everybody. Wade tucked the receipt into his wallet. "I'll be done before it gets here." He left without asking me anything. Brenda waited until his truck was gone. You could call him an idiot if it would help. It wouldn't. Would help me. He's not an idiot. He's planting bottom ground ahead of rain. So are 6 men who've been farming longer than he has. 7, if you count Lloyd. I don't. She smiled, then looked toward the gray strip of sky above the highway. "He's trying to prove it belongs to him," she said. "It doesn't yet." "That's not what I meant." Dad arrived near noon in the utility vehicle. Mud streaked up the sides. He bought a jug of hydraulic fluid and a package of shop towels he could have gotten from the supply room at home. "Wade's halfway done," he told Brenda. "Congratulations to both of you." Dad turned to me. "Planner's running good. I'm glad. We found that crooked gauge wheel. Len found it." Len made a spectacle of himself. "Did the wheel care?" He frowned. "You could come look when you get off. At the wheel, at the field. I've seen it, not planted. I've seen corn planted before, too." Brenda busied herself at the other register. Dad lowered his voice. "He could use some encouragement. Then encourage him. He wants it from you." "No, he wants approval." "Those aren't the same. Why do you have to ration kindness?" I stared at him. Dad had asked the question honestly. That was what made it cruel. "I learned from watching you," I said. He left the shop towels on the counter and walked out with the hydraulic fluid. Brenda picked up the towels. "Want me to run after him? He'll be back." Dad returned in less than a minute. Neither of us mentioned it. The clouds thickened after lunch. Every phone in the store chirped with an updated weather alert at 2:16. The predicted ½ inch became 1 to 2, with heavier amounts possible along Miller Creek. Wade called the store. Brenda answered, "Barlow Ag." A pause. "Yes, she's here." She looked at me. I shook my head. "She's with a customer," Brenda said. "What do you need?" Another pause. "We've got 2 closing wheel bearings left." She listened. "I'll set them out." When she hung up, she said, "He didn't ask to talk to you." "Good. He asked if you were there. That's different, is it?" I carried the bearings to the counter. Wade came in 20 minutes later with mud on his boots and sweat darkening his cap. His bandaged hand had been replaced by 3 smaller strips over the knuckle. He paid for the parts. "The forecast changed," he said. "I saw. I'm going to finish the field." "Okay." He closed his eyes briefly. Could you not say it like that today? How should I say it? Like you understand. I understand exactly. Then you know leaving half of it unplanted doesn't save the half I already did. It saves half your seed. And if the rain tracks north, I lose 4 planting days for nothing. He was right. He was also gambling. That was farming, which was why people who described it as a simple life had generally never depended on it. Did you clear the culvert? I asked. I pulled everything I could reach. With what? The loader. Did you get the packed grass inside? I can't crawl into a culvert before rain. You could have done it yesterday. His jaw flexed. A man waiting to buy twine became fascinated by a display of fly strips. Wade picked up the bearings. You gave your warning. Yes. I heard it. He left. By 6, the first drops were striking the store windows. They were large and widely spaced, leaving dark circles on the pavement. Brenda locked the door and turned the sign to closed. You going home? She asked. That's generally what happens when you close. You know what I mean. I'm not going to the field. Didn't say you should. You made the face. This is just my face. Brenda's face had negotiated late accounts, dishonest salesman, and 1 armed robbery in 2004. It did not accidentally communicate anything. I drove home through steady rain. Wade's planter lights moved across the Marlow bottom, 2 white points and a red glow sliding close to the ground. He had reached the lower half. Dad's utility vehicle was parked near the entrance. He sat inside beneath the plastic roof, supervising the rain. I kept driving. At my house, Mom's pot roast plate was still in the refrigerator. I ate it standing at the counter while the rain hardened on the roof. Water ran down the window in sheets, blurring the machine shed and the trees beyond it. My phone rang at 7:30. Mom, your father's still out there. He has a roof. He shouldn't be sitting in that damp. Tell him to come in. He won't listen to me. Welcome to the family. Mara. What do you want me to do? Go get him. He has a vehicle. You know his back gets worse in this weather. I put down my fork. Then Wade can bring him home. Wade is trying to finish. There it was again. Wade was busy doing the important work, so I was needed for everything surrounding it. I'm not going out there, Mom. She went silent. Rain crackled against the kitchen vent. You're really going to let this happen, she said. Let what happen? All of it. You're going to have to be specific. Your father sitting out in a storm, your brother working alone. This family not speaking unless somebody needs something. That last part isn't new. She hung up. I rinsed the plate, regretted saying it, then regretted regretting it. At 8:15, Dad's utility vehicle finally crossed the yard toward the farmhouse. The planter lights continued another hour. Wade finished. I knew because the lights folded inward, then climbed the lane to the machine shed. He parked under cover before the rain became violent. Thunder rolled close enough to shake my cabinet doors. I slept badly. Every burst against the windows pulled me awake. At 2, I checked the rain gauge beside the porch with a flashlight. It held almost 3 inches. Miller Creek would already be out of its low banks. I looked toward the cottonwoods. Lightning showed them bending silver against the dark. My phone had no messages. I went back to bed. The rain stopped near dawn. The sudden silence woke me. Water dripped from the eaves, and somewhere toward the barn a cow bawled. I put on boots and walked to the road. The Marlow bottom lay beyond the cottonwoods, hidden from the house by a slight rise. But I could see water shining through gaps where no water should have been. Miller Creek had spread into the trees. A pickup door slammed behind me. Wade crossed my yard carrying a rolled fencing jacket. His clothes were wet to the knees. You moving cattle? I asked. Dad turned the cow-calf pairs into the lower east pasture yesterday. The pasture notes in the binder had said not to use it until the creek settled. Why? He didn't want them chewing up the upper lot. And you agreed I was planting. That isn't an answer, I know. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were clear. The creek's over, he said. Not bad yet. We moved most of them uphill. Most? 3 crossed behind the old hedge line. I can't get them back without opening the creek gate. The creek gate will be underwater, up to the bottom rail. That was 10 minutes ago. He held out the jacket. I brought yours. I did not take it. You said you were handling the farm. I am. Then handle it. His arm dropped. For a second, anger moved through his face. Then he looked toward the trees. You're right, he said. He turned and walked back to his truck. That should have made it easier. Instead, I stood in the road listening to the distant bawling until it sounded less like cattle and more like a question. I went inside, pulled on old jeans, and took my fence pliers from the drawer. Wade was opening his truck door when I reached him. I'm helping with the animals, I said. Not the field. I know. If the planter's stuck, leave it. It's in the shed. If seed washes out, that's yours. I know. And after this, nothing changes. He looked at the pliers in my hand, then at me. I know, Mara. We drove along the pasture lane in 4-wheel drive. Water streamed across the ruts and gathered in every low spot. Wade kept both hands on the wheel. At the top of the rise, the ground dropped toward Miller Creek. The crossing had disappeared. Water boiled through the cottonwoods, carrying branches, corn stalks, and pieces of somebody's fence. The clogged culvert forced the current sideways, straight across the lower east pasture. 3 red cows stood behind the hedge line with water climbing their legs. Beyond them, the neat rows Wade had planted vanished beneath a widening brown sheet. The Marlow bottom was already under water. Wade killed the engine. Don't use the creek gate, I said. I wasn't going to. Good. What do we do? The old hedge line ran uphill at an angle, dividing the lower pasture from a narrow strip of ground we used for hay. The 3 cows were on the wrong side of it, bunched near a stand of locust trees. They had probably crossed through an opening before the water rose and then found the current between them and the herd. We cut the fence above them, I said. Give them a way into the hay strip. They'll have to move toward the water for 20 feet, then they can go uphill. I can bring the loader around behind them. You'll bury it to the axles. The ground up there is solid. It was solid yesterday. He looked toward the brown water. Pliers? He asked. I held them up. We drove as far as the lane allowed, then went on foot. The mud pulled at my boots. Wade carried 2 temporary posts and a coil of polywire, so we could close the gap after the cattle passed. He had thought of that without being told. The water was cold when we stepped into it. It reached my ankles first, then halfway to my knees where the ground dipped. The current wasn't strong there, but it dragged grass and bits of stalk against my legs. Wade moved ahead of me. Stay closer to the fence, I said. There's a wash on your left. How deep? Deep enough. He shifted right without arguing. At the hedge line, the wire was stretched tight by debris. I found the highest safe point and cut the top strand. It snapped back hard enough to sing through the rain-wet air. Wade flinched. That could have taken your face off. That's why I stood to the side. You might mention that before handing me the pliers next time. If there's a next time, remember it. We cut 2 more strands and pulled the wire low. Wade drove a temporary post into the soft ground and used the polywire to make a funnel toward the opening. The cows watched us with the fixed suspicion, cattle reserved for people doing complicated things on their behalf. Go around them, I said, slow. Wade started downhill. Not that way. You said around, above them. There's a hedge. There's an opening 30 yards up. I don't see it. You don't have to see it. Walk 30 yards. He gave me a look, but went. A minute later, he disappeared behind the locusts. The cattle lifted their heads. Wade's voice came from the other side, low and steady. Come on, get up! The first cow stepped forward, then turned toward the creek. I moved to block her. Mud shifted beneath my right boot. My foot slid into the hidden wash, and water jumped to my thigh. Wade came through the hedge faster than I'd ever seen him move. He caught the back of my jacket and hauled me sideways before I lost the other foot. I landed against him. We staggered together, arms flailing, and somehow stayed upright. You said it was on my left, he shouted. It was on your left. You're on the other side now. I know where I am. That makes one of us." The cow walked through the opening while we argued. Wade looked at her climbing into the hay strip. Did we mean to do that? Absolutely. The other two followed once they saw the first moving. We pushed them uphill, closed the temporary wire behind them, and stood in the rain, breathing hard. Wade's cap was gone. Mud covered one side of his face. My right boot had filled with water and made a sucking noise whenever I stepped. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm wet. You went down pretty hard." "I didn't go down. You were horizontal. I was briefly angled." He laughed. It came out breathless and close to panic. Then one of the cows broke into a trot and we followed them to the upper lot. Dad met us at the gate in his utility vehicle. "What took you so long?" Wade stared at him. Dad pointed toward the cattle. "They could have gone through the creek fence." "The creek fence is underwater," I said. "I know that." "Then why ask?" "I didn't ask anything. I said they could have gone through." Wade opened the gate and drove the cattle inside. Dad watched from the vehicle without getting out. "Where are the rest?" I asked. "Upper pasture. Counted twice." "Why did you move them into the lower east?" Dad rubbed a hand over his mouth. Grass was ready. The notes said, "Wait." The notes were cautious. The notes were right. He looked toward the flooded field. Nobody expected 3 inches. I did. You expected rain. That isn't the same. I told Wade to clear the crossing. You told him not to plant. I told him both. Dad turned to Wade. "How much of the field went under?" "All of it." "Upper end too?" I said all of it. Dad's eyes moved across the water. Only the slight rise at the entrance remained visible, a dark crescent above the flood. "It'll drain." "The seed won't climb back into the rows when it does," Wade said. Dad gripped the steering wheel. "We'll replant." "With what?" "We'll figure it out." I heard the "we." Wade did too. Dad finally looked at our soaked clothes. "Your mother has coffee at the house." "I'm going home," I said. "We need to look at the crossing, not until the water drops." "I know that." Wade walked past the utility vehicle toward his truck. Dad called, "Where are you going?" "To check the south fence. It's fine. It was fine before the water came up." Dad's expression tightened. "Don't get smart." Wade stopped. Mud had dried in streaks along his jaw. Without the cap, his hair stuck up in a way that made him look younger and more tired. "I'm checking the fence," he said. He kept walking. Dad looked at me as though I had taught Wade disrespect in the past 2 hours. "Don't," I said. "Don't what?" "Whatever you're about to make my fault." He put the utility vehicle in gear. I dumped the water from my boot before getting into Wade's truck. The sock stayed soaked, but at least it stopped sloshing. We drove south along the upper lane. Wade didn't speak until the farmhouse disappeared behind the rise. "You were right," he said. "I know. I'm not giving you satisfaction. I'm stating a fact. Facts are my favorite kind of satisfaction." He tightened his hands on the wheel. "I cleared what I could reach," he said. The intake looked open. The packed grass was inside the pipe. "I know that now. Most useful knowledge arrives late. Is that supposed to make me feel better?" No. We reached the south fence. Water had pushed branches against the lowest strand but hadn't broken it. Wade got out and pulled the debris free. I helped because we were already there and already wet. When we finished, he sat on the tailgate. "I planted every acre," he said. I saw. Finished at 9:40. The rain got heavy around 10. 10:07. He had been watching the clock. I leaned against the truck bed. "How much seed?" he told me. It was enough money to hurt. Not enough to destroy the farm, but enough to turn a thin year thinner before it had properly begun. "I called Len yesterday," he said. "What did he say?" "He'd come back if I apologized in front of Ron and Billy." "Are you going to?" I apologized for yelling. "I'm not apologizing for telling him to get off a moving planter." "That's fair. He said fair doesn't matter if I need him." That also sounds like Len. Wade scraped mud from his jeans with a stick. "I didn't plant because I thought it was safe," he said. I waited. "I planted because if I stopped after you warned me, Dad would know you were still making the decisions." "That's worse." "I'm aware." "No, Wade, that's worse than not knowing. You knew there was a risk, and you chose it because you didn't want to look like I'd taught you something. I didn't say I was proud of it. You moved cattle down there, too. Dad did. You left them. I was trying to finish. And where was Dad? In the utility vehicle. We both looked toward the farm. Wade tossed the stick aside. I thought coming back meant he'd teach me. He thinks he is. He tells me what to do, then calls you if I do it differently. He tells me to help, then tells you I'm bitter when I won't. Insurance policies. Looks like. He bent forward with his elbows on his knees. Why is it called Marlow Bottom? He asked. Dad never told you? He said some old farmer got stuck. Earl Marlow. He rented this ground before Dad bought it. Tried to cross after 2 days of rain and buried a farmall so deep they had to bring in 2 tractors to pull him out. Dad was 19. He still has a picture somewhere. So the field is named after somebody making a bad decision in mud. Most family history is. Did Earl keep farming it? For years. That's supposed to make me feel better? No. He looked toward the flooded trees. You never give the comforting answer. I gave them for 15 years. Nobody found them memorable. We sat there while the clouds broke apart overhead. Sunlight touched the wet pasture in scattered patches, too bright against the standing water. Wade said, "Thank you for coming. I came for the cattle." "I know. I mean it. I know that too." His voice held no resentment. That made me look at him. For the first time since the anniversary dinner, he wasn't asking me to change my answer. He was simply sitting beside it. Mom waved us into the kitchen when we returned. She had towels laid across the floor and 2 mugs waiting. "Oh my God, look at you," she said. "We're muddy," Wade told her. "I can see that. Wanted to make sure." She shoved towels at us and pointed toward the chairs. Dad stood by the sink on the phone with the insurance agent. His voice had the clipped confidence he used when he wanted a problem to become somebody else's. He ended the call. "Crop coverage won't do much on a partial replant," he said. "We'll have to see what emerges." "Nothing's emerging where it washed," Wade replied. "Seed could have held." It didn't. Dad poured coffee. This was an abnormal rain. Mom touched Wade's shoulder. Nobody could have known it would be this bad. I wrapped both hands around the mug and looked at my brother. He stared into his coffee. Dad continued. Plenty of experienced men got caught by that forecast. This wasn't about knowing a nickname for a field. Wade's fingers tightened around the handle. I waited for him to say he had known, that I had warned him, that the crossing had been clogged and the cattle notes had said to wait. He lifted the mug and drank. Mom looked relieved. I set my coffee down. The sound was quiet, but Wade flinched. Dad looked at me. "What?" I kept my eyes on Wade. "Say it." Mom's hand remained on his shoulder. "Say what?" Wade set down his mug. "Mara." "She warned you," Dad said. It wasn't a question. He had heard enough in my voice. Wade rubbed mud from the rim of his cup with his thumb. "She said the crossing needed clearing." Dad's jaw tightened. "You told me you cleared it." I pulled the brush off the intake. "That's not clearing it." "I'm aware of that now." "And the field?" "She told me not to plant." Mom slowly removed her hand from his shoulder. Dad stared at him. "When?" "Friday. And you planted anyway." "Yes." The kitchen clock ticked above the refrigerator. Mom's pot roast pan soaked in the sink, a pale island of grease floating in the water. Dad turned to me. "Why didn't you tell me?" I laughed. It was one hard sound, loud enough to make Mom flinch. "I did tell him," I said. "You knew I would have stopped it. That's why you gave him the farm, right? So you could stop every decision he makes? Don't twist this. I'm not touching it." Dad faced Wade again. "You knew that culvert backs up." "No, I didn't. It's backed up before. You never told me. You've seen it." "I've seen water in a field, Dad. I didn't know the grass packed inside the pipe. That's common sense. Then why didn't you clear it?" Dad stepped away from the sink. "I was dealing with the planter." "No, you were sitting in the utility vehicle watching me deal with the planter." Mom said, "Everybody is tired." Neither man heard her. Dad pointed toward the window. You want to run this place, you don't get to blame me when you make a bad call. I'm not blaming you for the field. You just did. I'm blaming you for acting like I should know things nobody taught me, Mara learned. The words landed between us. Wade looked at me. I said, "There it is." Dad's face changed as he realized what he had admitted, but he recovered quickly. She paid attention. "I left," Wade said. "You told everybody that was good. You said I had ambition. You did. And when I came back, you said that was good too. It was." "Is there anything I could have done that you wouldn't have turned into good news?" Mom whispered. "Wade." He pushed away from the table. "I need to check the field," Dad said. "Sit down." Wade picked up his wet jacket. I left first. He caught me beside my truck. "You got what you wanted," he said. I turned so fast he took a step back. "What I wanted? Not the flood. I didn't mean that. Then try again. You wanted them to know you were right. I wanted you to tell the truth before I had to drag it out of you. I was going to. When? I don't know." Not while he was standing there looking for somebody to blame. He was blaming the weather. You were comfortable with that. I was not comfortable. You looked pretty quiet. Wade shoved both hands through his wet hair. "What did you want me to say? Hey, Dad, the daughter you cut out understands your farm better than the son you chose." "He already knows that." "Mom doesn't. She knows too." "Then why did nobody say it until I did?" He didn't answer. "That's the whole system, Wade. Everybody knows in private. Everybody protects you out loud. I didn't ask them to. You keep saying that like accepting something happens by accident." His eyes hardened. "I admitted it. After I made you, I pulled you out of that wash. I moved those cattle with you. I thanked you, and then you let them erase me before my coffee cooled." His face went pale beneath the dried mud. I got into my truck. He caught the door before I could close it. "I'm sorry," he said. I looked at his hand on the metal. "For which part?" His grip loosened. "That's not fair. Neither is asking me to sort your apology for you." He let go. The water dropped by afternoon, leaving the Marlow bottom coated in brown silt. The planted rows remained visible on the upper end, then dissolved into curving scars where the current had carried soil sideways. Debris hung in the fence. Corn stalks, plastic bottles, a blue feed bucket that belonged to nobody we knew. Wade cleared the culvert on Monday. He rented a compact excavator and spent most of the day pulling out packed grass, branches, and a length of rusted wire. Dad stood nearby telling him where to dig, until Wade shut off the machine and waited. I watched from the road on my way to Barlow's. Dad kept talking. Wade stayed still. Eventually, Dad walked away and Wade restarted the excavator. That was how they worked now. One of them had inherited authority. The other had forgotten to surrender it. The new fuel supplier refused to bring a truck down the soft lane that week. Wade had to fill the portable tank in town, hauling it back in 3 trips. He didn't complain to me. I heard about it from Brenda, who heard it from the fuel driver, who had apparently delivered the story with more confidence than he delivered diesel. Len did not return. Ron and Billy came for the replanting, but neither knew the 12 Row's particular habit of dropping vacuum pressure after a hard turn. Wade spent half a day tracing lines and replacing seals before he found the cracked elbow Len kept taped inside the toolbox as a spare. He ordered the part and taped the old one himself. The repair held. I knew because Wade sent Dad a picture, and Dad forwarded it to me with the message. He figured it out. I deleted the text. At Barlow's, customers asked about the flood with the soft excitement people used when discussing somebody else's loss. Heard you got hit bad. Heard Wade planted the whole bottom. Heard the creek took 30 acres clean to Iowa. The field was still in Missouri, but by Wednesday it had apparently crossed state lines. I answered each person the same way. You'll have to ask Wade. Some did. To his credit, he told them the truth. Not every detail, but enough. He said he had pushed a bad window, underestimated the crossing, and planted ground he should have waited on. Men who would have mocked an excuse respected the admission. A few offered help. That irritated Dad, who preferred mistakes to remain inside the family until they could be rewritten as weather. Lydia Greer came into the store for mineral tubs on Friday. She and her husband Tom farmed west of town on ground that rolled instead of flooded. Lydia was 58, wore her silver hair cut close around her ears, and had the unsettling habit of going silent until people improved their answer. She watched me explain a dosing gun to Ron. When he left, she set both elbows on the counter. "You planning to stay here forever?" Brenda looked up from the invoice printer. I said, "This feels like a trap. It's a question. I work here. I can see that." Brenda tore off an invoice. "Careful, Lydia. I'm armed with late fees." Lydia smiled. "Tom and I are looking for an operations manager. Then you should put out an ad." We did. Got 19 applications from men who think having a truck counts as experience. That seems low. Truck quality has declined. Brenda carried the invoice into the office, though she left the door open. I said, "I already have a job." Lydia glanced toward the office. "Brenda pays you to know things her customers ought to know themselves. She also provides dental. So do we." "What happened to Curtis?" "Moving to Nebraska after wheat. His wife got a better position, and he's smart enough to follow her. You want somebody by summer? We want the right person before harvest. Sooner, if possible." I straightened a stack of receipts. "Why me?" Lydia went quiet. I regretted asking. Then she said, "Because when Tom broke his wrist 3 years ago, you reorganized our chemical delivery so we didn't lose a day, and you never once acted like you were doing us a favor. Because you know when to answer a question and when to go look. Because half the farmers in this county ask for you before they order anything expensive. That's customer service. That's operations." I looked toward Brenda's open door. She called out, "Don't involve me. You're already listening. Listening isn't involvement. It's management." Lydia took a business card from her wallet and set it on the counter. "Come talk to us. I'm not looking." Neither were we, until Curtis gave notice. She bought her mineral tubs and left. The card stayed beside the register until closing. Brenda counted the cash drawer without mentioning it. She had known Lydia longer than I had, which meant she also knew the salary range, the hours, and every reason the job might be terrible. I waited. She bundled the 20s with a rubber band. "You're going to hurt my feelings if you make me ask. I'm respecting your privacy." "You don't respect anybody's privacy." "True." She set the drawer aside. "You should talk to her." "You want to get rid of me?" "No. I want to be able to keep liking myself." That sounds inconvenient. It usually is. I picked up Lydia's card. "Dad will say I'm doing it to punish him. Your father thinks weather happens at him personally. Mom will say I'm abandoning the family. Your mother left 3 casseroles in our break room refrigerator when I had pneumonia. She'll survive. Wade will think I want him to fail." Brenda closed the register. "Do you?" I looked through the front window. The clouds had cleared. Evening sun shone across the highway, bright on every puddle. "No," I said. "Then stop arranging your life around proving it." I slipped the card into my pocket. When I got home, Wade sat on my porch steps. A clean fencing jacket lay folded beside him. Not mine, the one he had carried across my yard the morning of the flood. He had washed it so aggressively the canvas looked offended. "I came to apologize," he said. "You already did. I did it badly. That narrows it down." He stood. "I should have spoken in the kitchen before you made me. I knew you warned me. I knew why you came out there. Letting Mom say nobody could have known was cowardly." I waited. He looked toward the farmhouse. "I keep thinking if I admit you're right too often, Dad will decide I haven't earned this. Have you?" His mouth twisted. "No," he said. "But I don't know why you're the only one who has to hear me say that." I thought of the business card in my pocket. "Because I'm still the person you trust with the truth," I said. "That has to count for something." "It does." Hope moved across his face. I picked up the clean jacket and handed it back to him. "It just doesn't count as payment." Wade took the jacket. "That's not what I meant." I know. What does count? Doing it when it costs you. He looked at the clean canvas in his hands. I told Ron and Billy you warned me. That didn't cost you much. I'm apologizing to Len tomorrow. That might. His mouth pulled to one side. He'll enjoy it. He'll preserve the memory for future generations. Wade started across the yard, then turned back. Lydia Greer was at Barlow's. News in our county didn't travel. It reproduced. She buys supplies there. She asked Ron if he thought you'd leave. Ron needs a hobby. Are you? I haven't done anything. But you might. I put one hand on the door. Wade shifted the jacket under his arm. Does Dad know? It isn't Dad's business. He'll think it is. He thinks raccoons are socialists. His thoughts are his responsibility. Wade almost smiled. You'd have to leave this house, he said. Maybe you like this house. I also like being able to answer my own front door. He'll take it personally. I'm starting to think you all believe that's a medical condition. He looked toward the farmhouse again. Every conversation with Wade eventually bent in that direction, like a plant reaching for light. I won't tell him, he said. That's a low-cost choice. He nodded. I'm working up to the expensive ones. Lydia called the store before I could call her. Tom wants to know if you can come out tonight, she said. Does Tom know how invitations work? He told me to ask politely. And this is your version. It is. I agreed to 6:30. The Greer place sat 11 miles west of town on a ridge above 2 long valleys. Their farmyard wasn't prettier than ours, but it was maintained with the kind of boring consistency that prevented dramatic stories. The gravel was graded. The fuel tanks sat level. Doors opened without being lifted first. Lydia met me beside the office, a converted section of the machine shed with 2 windows and a faded green awning. Tom stood when I entered. He was tall, bald, and wore reading glasses on a cord around his neck. A legal pad lay in front of him, but he didn't pretend the meeting was casual. We appreciate you coming, he said. I'm still employed by Brenda. She reminds me every time I buy something. Lydia closed the door. Coffee? No, thank you. Good. Tom made it. He looked offended. It's hot, so is roofing tar. They had been married 34 years and argued with the efficiency of people who had already used up the surprising material. Tom explained the job. 700 acres owned and leased, corn and soybeans, a smaller cow-calf operation, 4 regular employees during the busy months, and contractors for the rest. Curtis, their current operations manager, would leave after wheat harvest, but could overlap for training. We don't need somebody to make us feel retired, Lydia said. We need somebody who can tell us when we're wrong before it gets expensive. Tom tapped his legal pad. Preferably in private. Not always, she said. I asked who made planting decisions. The operations manager recommends the plan, Tom said. We approve the budget. And if you disagree? We argue, Lydia said. Who wins? The person with the better reason. That sounds nice. It's not nice, Tom replied. Sometimes she has the better reason. Lydia ignored him. You'd have authority over scheduling, suppliers, equipment assignments, and the seasonal crew. Capital purchases come through us. If we overrule you, it's on us. I sat back. If something fails, we figure out why, Tom said. And then, try not to do it twice. He said it like the question confused him. They asked how I handled an employee who knew more than I did and didn't respect me. I thought of Len. Separate the knowledge from the behavior, I said. Use the first. Correct the second. If I can't do both, I'm probably not ready to supervise him. Lydia wrote that down. Tom asked what I would change first on their farm. I haven't seen enough to answer. He smiled. It wasn't a trick, exactly. It was a door he was pleased I hadn't walked through. We toured the equipment sheds and the office. Their records were digital, backed up, and boring. Curtis had left notes detailed enough that I disliked him on principle. At the south shed, Lydia said, There's one more issue. I waited. You live on your parents' property. Currently. If you work here, and remain there, Glenn will call you every time a belt squeals. He does that now. We'd be paying for your full attention." "I understand." "We have a house we rent near the West Ridge," Tom said. "You wouldn't have to take it, but it's available." The house was not a gift. The rent would come out of my salary. I appreciated that more than I could explain. "I'm not asking you to decide tonight," Lydia said. "You haven't made an offer. We will." Tom looked at her. "We said we'd discuss it. We discussed it in the pickup. You discussed it. I was driving." You nodded. There was a pothole. Lydia turned back to me. "We'll make an offer." I drove home with the windows down. The air smelled like damp soil and flowering locust. For 11 miles, nobody called me. The machine shed lights were on when I reached the Bell place. Wade's truck sat outside beside Len's dented Ford. I slowed. Through the open door, I saw Wade standing near the planter with Ron, Billy, and Len. Wade said something. Len crossed his arms. Ron looked at the floor. Billy studied the ceiling. Then Wade held out his hand. Len let him hold it there for several seconds before accepting. I kept driving. Dad came into Barlow's the next afternoon carrying nothing. Brenda looked over his empty hands. "What did you break?" "Nothing." "Then I don't know how to help you." He ignored her and came to the register where I was checking a delivery ticket. "You went to Greer's." "Yes." "Why?" "They invited me." "For what?" "You know for what." His face darkened. "Lydia called your mother." "Of course she did. She wanted to be sure this wouldn't cause trouble." "That was considerate of her." "You can't manage 2 farms. I'm not managing yours." He put both palms on the counter. "This tantrum has gone far enough." Brenda stopped typing in the office. I folded the delivery ticket. "You gave away the thing I spent half my life helping you build. I have not given anything away. You made the decision. Your brother is working himself into the ground trying to fix that field. I know." He apologized to Len in front of the crew. "I saw. He's stepping up." "Then why do you need me?" Dad opened his mouth. I waited. He looked down at his hands. "Because you know the place," he said. It was the closest he had come to saying it without turning the words into a favor. Knowing it isn't enough, remember? That was said in anger. No, it was said over steak. Brenda came out of the office holding a stack of papers she didn't need. Dad glanced at her. "This is private. You're leaning on my register." He straightened. "I'm asking you to come home tonight," he said. "We need to talk. I am home." His eyes sharpened. "The house you're living in belongs to the farm." There it was. Not a threat, he would say. A fact. Brenda placed the papers beside me. I said, "Do you want me out?" Dad looked startled. "That is not what I said." "Then what did you mean? That you already have a place in this family? A place you can mention whenever I act like it's mine?" His cheeks reddened. "I have never charged you rent. I paid for the furnace, the roof repair, the plumbing under the kitchen. I'm not asking for credit. I'm telling you free isn't the word. I'm your father, and that's why you thought I'd never send you an invoice." He turned and walked out. Brenda waited until the door shut. "If he comes back with a broken hose, I'm charging double." The Greer's offer arrived that evening by phone. Lydia gave me the salary first, then the benefits, then the work schedule with no attempt to make farming sound like a 40-hour week. The pay was better than Barlow's, though not enough to turn the decision into arithmetic. The authority mattered more. So did the West Ridge house. "We need an answer Monday," she said. "I understand. Brenda knows." "You told her?" "She told us what we'd have to pay to keep from insulting you." That sounds like Brenda. She also threatened Tom. He responds well to structure. After we hung up, I sat on my porch steps until the yard lights came on. Mom crossed the grass carrying no food. That frightened me more than a casserole would have. She sat beside me without asking. For a while, we listened to frogs calling from the wet ditch. "Your father didn't mean the house was conditional," she said. "He meant for me to hear that it could be. He's scared. Everybody keeps telling me that. Because it's true. So is everything I said. Mom picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. When we bought this place, we didn't have enough money to heat every room, she said. Your father and I slept in the downstairs office all winter. We kept the pipes from freezing with heat lamps. Every person we knew said we'd lose it. You didn't. No. We worked. I know. We thought if we kept the farm together, it would keep the family together. I looked toward the dark fields. How's that going? She flinched, but she didn't cry. That was unkind, she said. Yes. We sat another minute. Then she said, Wade needed the farm more. I know. You always had something inside you. Even when things went wrong, you knew who you were. Wade becomes whoever is standing closest. That isn't his fault. No, it isn't mine either. Her hands folded tightly in her lap. I thought if he had the farm, he'd have a shape. And what did you think I'd have? She looked at my house. You had made a life. No, Mom. I made myself useful. That isn't all you are. It's all you budgeted for. She stood. At the edge of the porch, she turned. If you take that job, are you leaving? I'd have to. You could drive. From Dad's property. So every morning I pass his broken gates on my way to manage somebody else's? We'd miss you. I live a quarter mile away, and most times you come over. You bring a task. That isn't fair, no, but it's close enough to hurt. She walked home across the yard. The next day, Dad and Wade argued beside the planter, loudly enough that I heard them from my porch. The replant plan was spread across the hood of Wade's truck. Dad jabbed at it with one finger. You're putting beans on the washed section. I'm putting a cover on the worst of it and beans where the stand is gone. That isn't what I said. It's what the ground needs. According to who? Brenda, the extension guide, and 3 men who replanted bottom ground this week. Did Mara tell you? No. You ask her? No. Dad looked toward my house. Wade stepped between him and the view. She's not doing this, he said. She put this whole thing in your head. I flooded a field all by myself. You wouldn't be fighting me if she hadn't made everything about ownership. Wade folded the plan. She didn't make it about ownership. You did when you announced who gets it. Dad's face went still. I had waited years to hear Wade say something like that. It cost him. Dad took the truck keys from the hood and walked away. Wade watched him go, then noticed me on my porch. For once, neither of us pretended I hadn't heard. He crossed the yard. I don't know how to do this with him, he said. You wanted him to teach you. He doesn't want to teach me. He wants me to repeat him. That's how he knows you respect him. Wade sat on the bottom step. I thought the farm would mean he trusted me. It means he wants to see himself continue. And I was the labor. He rubbed both hands over his face. Do you want it? He asked. The farm? Yes. Really? I looked at the machine shed, the barn, the wet line of trees above the Marlowe bottom. I wanted them to see me when they looked at it. That isn't what I asked. It's the answer I have. He lowered his hands. I don't know if I want it, he said. I wanted to be the person they believed could have it. The truth sat between us, expensive and late. My phone rang in my pocket. Lydia Greer's name filled the screen. Wade looked at it, then at me. You should answer, he said. I did. When Lydia asked if I had made my decision, I watched my brother sitting on the steps of the house our father still owned. Yes, I said. I'll take the job. Lydia said, good. No celebration, no gasp. Just one firm word followed by, come by tomorrow at 5. We'll go over the start date and the house. I need to give Brenda notice. She expects it. Of course she does. We don't keep secrets well out here. I looked at Wade. No, I said. We really don't. After I hung up, he remained on the step. When do you start? 2 weeks if Brenda can work with it. And you'll move to their rental? Yes. He nodded slowly. Congratulations. Thank you. He said it right, but his face didn't match. What? I asked. Nothing. Don't make me sort your reaction, too. He looked toward the gravel between his boots. I'm jealous. Of the job? of getting to choose something before Dad chooses it for you. The honesty took some of the air out of me. You chose plenty, I said. I chose to leave. He called it ambition. I came back because everything fell apart, and he called it loyalty. At some point, I stopped knowing whether I was making decisions or just handing him material. You still accepted the farm. I know. You keep wanting that to be the end of the sentence. He looked up. And you keep wanting it to be the whole story. Neither of us was wrong enough to make the argument satisfying. I told Brenda the next morning in her office. She listened with her hands folded over her stomach and no expression on her face. When I finished, she said, 2 weeks is insulting. I can give 3. 2 is fine. You just said it was insulting. I'm establishing that I'm wounded. You don't look wounded. I'm bleeding internally. She opened the bottom desk drawer and took out a yellow folder. Inside was a list of names. What's that? People who've asked for jobs. You already have a list? I run a business, Mara. I don't rely on the fantasy that people will sacrifice every opportunity to spare me an inconvenience. I sat back. Brenda read my face. That was aimed at your father, she said. I know, I'm proud of you. Don't do that. Why? Because I might cry and then you'll tell people. I'll tell everybody you developed a sudden eye allergy. She stood and came around the desk. Brenda hugged like she conducted business. Briefly, firmly, without inviting debate. Then she pushed me away. You're still working the full 2 weeks. There she is. I went to the farmhouse after closing. Nobody had invited me, and there was no food on the table. Mom sat with a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. Dad stood by the window. Wade leaned against the counter with his arms folded. He had told them. Mom looked at the empty chair beside her. Sit down. I sat. Dad remained standing. You accepted. Yes, you couldn't discuss it with us first. I discussed my role here for weeks. That isn't the same as taking a job with a neighbor. No, they offered me one. Mom's fingers tightened around the cup. We thought you were only going to talk. I did talk. Then I decided. Dad turned from the window. Greers have been waiting for a chance to pull you away. They posted an ad before they spoke to me. They know what this does to us. What does it do? You tell me. You're the one leaving in the middle of planting. I stopped working here before planting started. You pulled the calf. You moved cattle. You fixed Russell's fence. All things I had already promised except the cattle. I went because animals were in water. Dad spread his hands as though I had proven his point. You're part of this whether you like it or not. I'm part of the family. That is not the same as being part of the labor. Mom said, Nobody thinks of you as labor. I know. Labor gets wages. Dad began pacing between the window and the table. His back made his right step shorter, but anger covered most of the limp. We can pay you. Wade looked at him. I said, Wade already offered that. I'm not talking about some casual arrangement. We'll make you operations manager. Who's we? Your mother and me? And Wade? He'll own the farm when the time comes. He'll handle long-term planning and the business side. You'll run day-to-day operations. It was the same chair with a new cushion. Who makes the final call? I asked. Dad's patience cracked. Why are you obsessed with that? Because the answer is never me. You'd have authority. Until I disagree with you. I won't be here forever. Then until I disagree with Wade. Wade looked down. Mom leaned forward. It's a real position, Mara. With a salary. You said that was what you wanted? No. I said I wanted my work to matter. It does matter. Then why does Wade own the result? Dad struck the back of the empty chair with his palm. Because that is our decision. The sound snapped through the kitchen. I nodded. And the Greer job is mine. Mom's eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. What about your house? She asked. I'm moving. You don't have to. The job comes with a rental. You could stay here and drive past every problem twice a day. We would respect your job. Dad looked away, which answered that. Mom said, You don't know that we wouldn't. Dad walked into Barlow's 3 times in 2 weeks to ask me farm questions. Because you were there. I'll still be in the county. That's different. How? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Distance was only acceptable when Wade chose it. Dad sat at last. The anger seemed to drain out of him, leaving him older. "You're willing to walk away from your home," he said. "I'm walking away from your house. I never treated it like that. You did at Barlow's." I was angry. Anger keeps telling the truth in this family, then asking for privacy. Wade made a small sound that might have been agreement. Dad heard it. "You have something to say?" Wade unfolded his arms. "It's the same offer I made her." "No, it isn't." "It is. More formal, maybe. But I own it. She runs it. You need her." Wade looked at me. "I know." Dad leaned across the table. "Then tell her. She knows. Tell her to stay." Wade's jaw tightened. "She said no. You accept that too easily. I'm learning to accept answers." Dad stared at him as if I had infected him. Mom got up and carried her untouched tea to the sink. "If you move," she said, facing away from us, "what happens when we need you?" The question hurt because it was honest. "You call me." "And you'll come? If you need your daughter?" She turned. "How are we supposed to know the difference?" "I think that's the first thing we have to learn." Mom pressed her knuckles to her mouth. Dad said, "This is cruel." "No. Cruel would be disappearing." "I'm giving you a boundary and an address. You sound like Brenda." "That isn't an insult. You think those people will care about you because they put you in charge? I think they'll employ me because I can do the work. And when you make a mistake, they said we'll figure out why." He laughed bitterly. "That's what people say before there's money on the line. There's always money on the line. You'll find out family gives more grace than strangers." I looked at Wade. He looked back. The flooded field sat between us, unmentioned and present. "I've had enough grace," I said. I stood. Mom followed me to the door but didn't bring a plate. She touched my arm once, then let go. Outside, Wade caught up near the gravel. "I'm sorry," he said. "For telling them? They had to know." "I know. For not saying more. You said enough." "No, I didn't." He shoved his hands into his pockets. "When Dad made the offer, part of me wanted you to take it. Most of you did. Probably. At least you're getting honest about percentages." He looked toward my house. "I'll help you move. Dad will hate that." "I know. That almost makes it tempting. I'm free next Saturday. You're replanting. Ron and Billy can finish the upper section. You need to be there." "I need to help my sister move." The answer sounded practiced, but not false. I said, "Fine." Dad stopped coming into my house without knocking. I knew because he didn't come in at all. Mom came twice, both times carrying empty boxes from the grocery store. She labeled them with a black marker in handwriting so neat it looked printed. Kitchen, bathroom, books. On the fourth box, she wrote MISC, and then stared at the word. "This feels wrong," she said. "The period, all of it." I folded the bottom flaps together. "The period is unnecessary." She crossed it out. We packed without discussing the farm. Mom wrapped my drinking glasses in old newspapers. I took pictures off the walls and found pale rectangles where the paint had been protected from sun. The house began showing me which parts of my life had only been temporary. In the spare bedroom, Mom opened the closet and found my old Bell Farms cap on the top shelf. "You should take this. I don't wear it." "You used to. I used to do a lot of things." She brushed dust from the brim. The embroidery was faded, the B crooked from years of washing. "You were proud of this place," she said. "I still am. Then how can you leave?" "Being proud of what I gave doesn't mean I have to keep giving." She held the cap against her chest. "I wish we had done this differently," she said. It was not an apology, but it was the first sentence that had walked near one without being dragged. "So do I." She placed the cap in the box marked MISC. I took it out after she left and hung it back on the nail. The Westridge rental had beige carpet, brown cabinets, and a refrigerator that made a knocking sound every 11 minutes. It sat beside a windbreak of cedar trees, with the Greer's south fields visible beyond them. The porch was level. Lydia handed me the keys. "Tom says the refrigerator's fine," she said. "It's knocking. He thinks machines make noises when they're happy. Dad thinks that, too." She looked at me, then toward the empty rooms. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. That's unusual around here. I'm not paying you for family history. The move took 1 truck, Wade's trailer, and 4 trips. Wade arrived Saturday at 7 with biscuits and black coffee. He carried boxes without asking what was in them, though he dropped 1 marked bathroom and looked relieved when it only contained towels. Mom came with cleaning supplies. Dad did not. By afternoon, the little white house echoed. My bed was gone. The kitchen drawers were empty. Only the old cap remained by the door. Wade took the final box to his truck. "You coming?" he asked. "In a minute?" I walked through each room once. In the kitchen, the phone rang in my pocket. "Dad." I answered. "The auger bearings rattling again," he said. I closed my eyes. For 1 second, the old answer rose automatically. "Shut it down. Check the housing. Don't run it dry." Then I looked at the empty counter where the binder had once sat. "Call Wade," I said. "He's with you." "I know. We need the auger tonight. Then call Ron." Dad was silent. I waited. Finally, he said, "Are you coming for supper tomorrow?" It was the first question he had asked that belonged to a father instead of a farmer. "Yes," I said. "I'll come for supper." I ended the call, took the Bell Farms cap from its nail, and set it on the kitchen counter. Then I locked the door behind me. Wade drove slowly enough that none of my dishes broke, which meant the trip took 20 minutes instead of 12. At the West Ridge house, he set the last box on the kitchen floor and listened to the refrigerator knock. "You rented a woodpecker." "It came with the place. Dad could fix that. Dad would turn it off, wait until it stopped knocking, and declare victory." Wade opened the refrigerator door. The sound ceased. "See?" I shut it again. 11 minutes later, it knocked. Mom arranged my cleaning supplies beneath the sink and cried where she thought neither of us could see her. Wade noticed, too. We let her have the privacy. When they left, I ate takeout noodles sitting on a box because we had forgotten the chairs. Nobody called to ask where the shutoff was, what time feed arrived, or whether a bearing sounded serious. The refrigerator knocked. I slept 10 hours. Sunday supper at the farmhouse was roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and silence. Mom asked about the new house. Wade asked whether the refrigerator had exploded. Dad asked if Tom Greer still bought cheap grease. I said, "I don't know." He looked disappointed, but didn't explain which grease was superior. The Bell Farms cap remained on the kitchen counter where I had left it. Dad had placed his keys inside it. I noticed and said nothing. Halfway through supper, Wade mentioned that the stand on the replanted section looked uneven. Dad turned toward me automatically. I took a drink of water. He caught himself. "Needs time," Dad told Wade. "It's been 12 days. Then dig some plants and check the roots." I did. "What did you find?" For the next few minutes, they discussed roots, soil crust, and whether another pass would do more harm than good. I ate my chicken. Mom watched me with an anxious expression, as if silence might be painful. It wasn't. It was strange. That was different. When Dad reached for his plate at the end of the meal, I stood to clear it. He held on for a second. "You don't work here," he said. "I can still carry a plate." His fingers loosened. Mom smiled down at the table. My first morning at Greer's, Curtis showed me 4 sets of keys, 3 file systems, and a whiteboard so crowded with abbreviations it looked like a threat. He was 47, wore steel-framed glasses, and spoke about moving to Nebraska with the cheerful terror of a man who had agreed to something before imagining winter. "Lydia says you know what you're doing," he said. "Lydia says a lot. Good, you've met her." He walked me through the equipment schedules, crop plans, leases, and staff assignments. The operation was organized, but not perfect. Tom postponed maintenance if a machine still started. Lydia ordered mineral based on price and forgot to tell anybody when she switched brands. Two of their rented fields had names nobody could explain: Telephone and Dead Dog. "What happened to the dog?" I asked. "No idea. Is there a telephone?" "There was in 1978. Good system." "Wait until you meet Little Big." For the first week, I expected Tom to appear behind me whenever I made a decision. He didn't. That didn't mean he agreed with everything. When I changed a delivery window to keep trucks off a soft lane, he told me I was being overly cautious. I showed him the forecast and the cost of pulling a loaded truck out of mud. He grumbled. The delivery moved. 2 days later, I sent a tender truck to telephone when the spray crew was waiting at Little Big. The mistake cost us 3 hours and earned me a phone call from Tom that began, "Tell me you have a reason." I misread the board. "That's not a reason. No, it's the mistake." He breathed into the phone. "How do we stop it happening again?" I color-coded the field names and added map coordinates to every work order. Tom hated the colors. He used them anyway. Nobody told me the mistake proved I had been a bad choice. Nobody quietly called someone else to check my work. Nobody offered to hide it from Lydia. The absence of humiliation felt so unfamiliar that I kept waiting for the second half. It didn't come. At the Bell place, Wade got the uneven stand through a crusting problem without replanting a second time. He sent me one picture of the roots, then followed it with, "Not asking, just showing you." I replied, "Looks alive." He answered, "High praise." Dad called twice that month. The first time, he asked whether I was coming Sunday. The second time, he told me Mom's kitchen faucet was leaking. "Is that a farm call or a daughter call?" I asked. "A faucet call. I'll come look after work." When I arrived, a new faucet sat in a box on the counter. Dad had already removed the old one and was lying beneath the sink, stuck because his back wouldn't let him turn. I helped him slide out. "You could have called a plumber," I said. "I know how to install a faucet. You're on the floor. I got down here, didn't I?" That's half the trip. Wade arrived 10 minutes later with a basin wrench. Dad let him finish the installation while I drank iced tea with Mom. That was new, too. I could help my father off a floor without becoming responsible for the sink. Summer settled over the county. The flooded field dried into ridges and scars, green in patches, bare in others. Wade planted cover on the worst section. Dad complained about the cost until Russell told him it was the first sensible thing anybody had done with that ground in years. Dad then described it as our plan. Wade led him. Not every correction had become worth the fight. He worked hard. That fact never changed. He learned to hear trouble in the planter vacuum, to check the pasture before trusting the forecast, and to ask Ron for an opinion without making the question sound like weakness. He also lost weight, stopped wearing the embroidered cap, and began waking before dawn even on days when no work required it. One evening, he came to the West Ridge house carrying a pizza. "Peace offering?" I asked. "No, I'm hungry, and Mom puts vegetables on hers." "Peppers? Broccoli. Call the police." We ate at the small table Lydia had found in a storage shed. The refrigerator knocked twice. Wade looked around the kitchen. "You like it here?" "Yes." He nodded as if confirming bad news. "How's the job?" "I sent a truck to the wrong field." "What happened?" Tom asked. "How I'd stop it happening again. That's all." He complained about my color coding. Wade picked cheese from the pizza box. "I left the east pasture gate open last week. Anything get out?" "No." Ron caught it. "What did Dad say?" "He asked if I was trying to bankrupt him one open gate at a time. That sounds like him." I laughed. "That was dangerous. He didn't speak to me for 2 days. That sounds peaceful." It was. His smile faded. "I told the fuel supplier to switch us back," he said. "Good. Dad said it makes me look weak. Dad thinks loyalty is what other people owe him. I told him the lower price isn't worth a driver who won't use the lane. Also good. He said I only changed it because you didn't like the new company. Less good." Wade folded his napkin into smaller and smaller squares. "I can do this," he said. "I know. That's the problem." I waited. He pressed the napkin flat. I keep thinking if I were failing, then not wanting it would make sense. But I'm getting better. The farm's recovering. Len comes when I call now, though he makes me apologize for things that happened before I came home. He saves them up. I can do the work, Mara. You said that. I hate it. The refrigerator knocked. Wade laughed once, but there was nothing funny in his face. I don't hate the land, he said. I don't even hate the work. I hate waking up every morning knowing Dad will turn whatever I do into a test I didn't agree to take. You could stop treating his opinion like a grade. You first. That hit where he meant it to. I sat back. He rubbed his eyes. Sorry. No, you're right. I wanted the farm because it meant I wasn't the screw-up who came home with boxes in his truck. If Dad gave me this, then every stupid thing before it became part of the journey. And if you give it back, then maybe it was just stupid. I looked at my brother across the table. You came home because your life fell apart, I said. That isn't the same as being a failure. It felt like it. I know. I thought you'd understand. I did. That's why I helped you unload. His eyes went wet. Wade looked toward the window until they cleared. I don't want the farm, he said. Tell them. I'm telling you. I'm still the safe place where truth doesn't cost anything. He looked down at the shredded napkin. I'll tell them. He did it the following Sunday. Mom had made meatloaf. Dad had already complained that it was dry, so the room was properly prepared for pain. Wade put down his fork. I'm not taking the farm. Dad kept chewing. Mom said, What? I'll finish the season. I'll do whatever we need to make a clean transition, but I don't want to own it. Dad swallowed. This is about one bad spring. No, you flooded one field. It's not about the field. Mara put this in your head. Wade shook his head. She told me to think for myself. This is what happened. Dad looked at me. You knew. He told me this week, and you encouraged him. I told him to tell you. Mom's face had gone pale. Where will you go? I don't know yet. You can't make a decision like this without a plan. I accepted the farm without one. Dad pushed back from the table. You came here saying you wanted to build something. I wanted you to believe I could. I did believe it. No, Dad, you believed giving me the farm would turn me into whoever you wanted. That's garbage. You gave me authority, then called Mara every time I used it. Because she knew better. Wade nodded. She did. And you still chose me. Dad stared at him. Mom began gathering plates, though two of us were still eating. We don't have to settle this tonight. Yes, we do, Wade said. Because if we don't, you'll wait for me to calm down, and Dad will tell people I had a hard week. You are having a hard week, she said. I've had a hard life, according to you. That's how I keep getting prizes. Mom stopped moving. Wade's voice softened. You kept rescuing me because Mara could survive without being rescued. I let you. I'm sorry. Dad stood at the head of the table. If neither of you wants this place, what exactly have your mother and I worked for? I didn't say I never wanted it, I replied. He turned to me too quickly. Hope was worse on his face than anger. I continued. I wanted it when choosing me would have meant something. It can still mean something. No. Now it means Wade said no. Mom sat down again. We could revisit the decision, Dad said. Wade looked at me. I shook my head. I have a job. I have a home. I'm not coming back because your first plan failed. Then what do you expect us to do? Dad demanded. Lease it, hire someone, sell part of it. Keep farming until you don't want to. Those are your decisions. We kept it together for you. No. You kept it together for the child you imagined would inherit it. Neither of us turned out to be that person. Dad walked out. The screen door struck the frame behind him. Mom stared at his empty chair. Wade whispered, I'm sorry. She looked from him to me. I don't know who we are if we aren't leaving you the farm, she said. I reached across the table and covered her hand. Then maybe we finally find out. Dad did not return before I left. The next evening, he called while I was checking a delivery schedule at Greer's. His voice sounded tired. Can you come by tomorrow morning? For what? I want you to ride the place with me. Is something wrong? No. I waited. He added, not a farm question. That wasn't entirely true. With Dad, nothing happened on the land without becoming about the land. But it was close enough. I'll be there at 7, I said. At 7, Dad was waiting in the utility vehicle. He had put the plastic windshield back on even though the morning was warm. The cloudy panel made the farm look faded and slightly crooked. I climbed in. You want me to drive? I can drive. I was asking. I know. He shifted into gear. We passed the machine shed without stopping. The planter had been washed and folded beneath the awning. Wade's truck was gone, probably to the south field. Dad didn't tell me where he was. The utility vehicle rattled along the lane. Corn stood waist-high on the better ground, dark green where the drainage held, and lighter across the ridges. Dad slowed at every gate, looking through each opening. How's Greer's? He asked. Busy. Tom still postponing maintenance? Yes. He'll run a bearing until it becomes powder. I've noticed. You tell him? I put the repairs on the schedule. He moved 2 and complained about all 4. Dad nodded. That sounds like Tom. It was the first time he had asked about my work without using the question to compare it to his. We drove past the west field. The corn Wade had chosen stood evenly across most of it. Samples came back the way he thought, Dad said. I heard. He made the right call. Yes. Dad's hands tightened on the wheel. Complimenting Wade without turning the compliment into proof of his own judgment took visible effort. At the lower lane, he turned toward Miller Creek. The Marlow bottom had changed since I last walked it. Wade's cover crop had emerged in a green haze across the washed section. Soybeans filled the higher rows, thinner than they should have been but alive. Driftwood remained piled near the crossing. The culvert opening was clear. Dad stopped beside the field and turned off the engine. Cicadas buzzed in the cottonwoods. Without the motor, I could hear water moving through the pipe. Dad rested his forearms on the steering wheel. Your brother thinks we should lease out the row ground next year. What do you think? I think he's quitting. He's finishing the season. He's quitting after. He's allowed. Dad looked at me. You make everything sound simple? No. I make choices sound like choices. I didn't feel like I had one. When? With the farm. With the 2 of you. You had every choice. I had one child who left and one who stayed. If I divided the place and Wade sold his half, did he say he would? He didn't have to. So you protected the farm from something Wade might do by taking it from the person who didn't leave. Dad stared through the windshield. I thought you'd stay anyway, he said. The truth was so plain that it took me a second to absorb it. You thought I'd keep doing the work. I thought the farm mattered to you. It did. More than it mattered to him. Yes. That's why I knew you wouldn't abandon it. I looked across the field at the faint curve where water had rewritten Wade's straight rows. You used my love for this place as a guarantee, I said. Dad's mouth moved, but no answer came. A red-winged blackbird landed on a fence post. The post leaned toward the creek, and the bird adjusted without complaint. Dad said, I could change the decision. No, you don't even know what I'm offering. Yes, I do. You're offering me the farm after Wade refused it. I'm offering to recognize what you've done. That was available before. I made a mistake. The sentence sounded unnatural in his voice, each word handled separately. I waited. He took off his cap and rubbed the flat strip of hair beneath it. I thought Wade needed a chance. He did, and I thought, you needed... He looked at me. I don't know. You never seemed to need anything. I needed parents who didn't confuse competence with consent. He flinched. I hadn't planned the sentence. Dad's best injuries were usually accidental, too. He put the cap on the dashboard. You always knew this land better, he said, even when you were young. Wade looked at a field and saw how fast he could drive across it. You looked at what was growing. He meant it as praise. For most of my life, I would have taken it that way. I would have stored it beside every rare compliment and used it to excuse the work that followed. Instead, I looked at my father and heard what he had actually said. "You knew what I was worth," I said. That wasn't the same as treating me like I mattered. His face folded slightly around the eyes. I didn't rescue him from it. Water moved through the culvert, carrying a few leaves into the lower channel. After a while, Dad said, "What do I do now?" "You decide with Mom." "That's not what I'm asking." "I know." He wanted the answer that would let him keep the farm, keep Wade, bring me home, and never become the man who had chosen wrong. There wasn't one. "You could lease the row ground," I said. "Keep the house, the barns, whatever cattle you can manage without expecting free help, or hire someone, or sell. But don't make the next decision about forcing one of us to prove the last one wasn't a mistake. Leasing feels like giving up. To you. What does it feel like to you? Letting the land be land." He considered that. "My father would hate it." "Your father has been dead 23 years. He could still hate something. That part of the family is very strong." Dad laughed once. It surprised both of us. He started the engine. Before shifting into gear, he said, "Will you help me compare lease offers?" "No." His expression closed. Then I added, "I'll tell you the questions I'd ask. Once. You and Mom can choose." The muscles in his jaw loosened. "Once," he repeated. "Don't get greedy." We drove back by the north pasture. 17 grazed near the fence. Her calf stretched in the shade. The trough ran clear. At the farmhouse, Mom stood on the porch, pretending she hadn't been watching for us. Dad got out slowly. I waited until he had both feet steady, then climbed out without offering a hand. He didn't take that personally. Or he did and kept it to himself, which was progress. Wade finished the season. He worked through harvest beside Dad, Ron, Billy, and Len. The Marlow bottom produced badly where it had flooded and respectably where it hadn't. Dad called the result disappointing. Wade called it a crop, which was closer to the truth. They argued over harvest order, storage, truck timing, and whether a hamburger counted as supper if eaten standing beside a grain cart. But Dad stopped calling me to settle the arguments, most of the time. Once he texted, "Wade wants to start south. Rain Thursday. Thoughts?" 5 minutes later, another message arrived. Never mind, his call. I saved that one. The Greer job became mine in increments. Curtis moved to Nebraska. I took his name off the office door and left the screw holes visible because Tom said filling them was unnecessary. Lydia backed me when I replaced a supplier she liked. Tom blamed my color coding when he drove to Telephone instead of Dead Dog, even though the sheet said Dead Dog in orange letters large enough to read from Missouri. I made decisions. Some were right, some cost money. None required me to become grateful for being heard. Mom learned to call and say, "Do you want to have lunch?" without adding a task before I answered. The first 3 times I asked what she needed. The 4th time she said, "I need lunch." So we had lunch. She apologized in pieces, never the complete speech people imagine will repair a family. She said she'd been afraid Wade would disappear again. She said she had believed I was stronger than hurt. She admitted that every time she called my sacrifice help, she made it sound temporary enough not to repay. I told her strength did not prevent injury. She said, "I know that now." It was late, but it was hers. After harvest, Wade rented an apartment in St. Joseph and took an account job with an equipment dealer. He was good at it. He understood farmers well enough to speak their language and disliked farming enough not to romanticize their choices. On the morning he moved, Mom packed sandwiches for a 40-minute drive. Dad inspected the trailer straps 4 times. I carried a box marked kitchen to Wade's truck. "Careful," he said. "That one has dishes." "You dropped my bathroom box. It had towels. I didn't know that when you dropped it." He took the box from me. The old confidence had returned to his face, but it fit differently. Less like a performance. More like something he was willing to test. "Dad told me what you said at the bottom," he said. Which part? About knowing your worth. I looked toward the farmhouse. Dad stood beside the trailer, pulling a strap that could not become tighter without changing the laws of matter. He wasn't supposed to repeat that. He's terrible with private family business. He gets it from Russell's wife. Wade smiled. I'm sorry, he said, for accepting the farm, for expecting you to stay under it. For all the times before that, I don't remember well enough to list. Good apology. I practiced. On who? Len. He said it needed fewer words and cash. That sounds like Len. Wade shifted the box against his hip. I did think you'd stay, he admitted. I know. I thought that was because we were close. We were. And also because it was convenient. Yes. He nodded. Both things can be true. Russell teach you that? I'm developing wisdom. Put it on your resume. He loaded the box. Dad and Mom leased most of the acreage to a neighboring operation the following spring. They kept the farmhouse, the barns, a small hay field, and enough cattle for Dad to feel useful without making usefulness an emergency for everybody else. The first planting season I spent entirely away from the Bell ground felt wrong in my body. I woke listening for Dad's truck. I checked Miller Creek after heavy rain. I drove past the Marlow Bottom more often than necessary, but I did not turn in. One Sunday, I arrived for supper and found the Bell Farms cap hanging beside Dad's coat in the mudroom. The crooked B had faded nearly white. Dad saw me looking at it. Thought you might want that back, he said. I left it for you. It doesn't fit me. It never fit me either. He considered the cap, then left it where it was. Mom called from the kitchen that the roast was getting cold. Wade was already at the table, visiting from St. Joseph, arguing that raccoons had hands. Their paws, I said, taking my usual chair. Dad picked up his fork, started to point with it, and stopped himself. Outside the window, evening light lay across the fields. The farm was still there. So were we. For the first time, neither one had to belong to the other.